Anna Hoffman.
Hey friends, I'm Nikolai.
Hi, I'm Mustafa Turaman.
Hi, I'm Tanya Janka.
Hello.
And I'm excited to be the speaker at Azure Summit 2021.
It's a fantastic event that will be 11 days live streaming,
where more than 100 speakers from all over the world.
I'm excited to speak at Azure Summit about Power BI and Synapse Analytics.
And I'm going to talk about security.
And also a Microsoft MVP for Azure.
I'm speaking at Cloud Summit about automated release of .NET application.
And the best part is that this is a free event.
Come join me live at Learn TV on September 17th.
Come join me live on Learn TV on September 14th.
Come join me on Learn TV on the 14th of September this year.
A bunch of other Microsoft and community speakers.
So if you want to learn how to secure Azure, come to my talk.
Join us, it will be a lot of fun.
See you there.
See you there.
See you there.
See you there.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Cloud Summit 2021. I'm your host Stephen Simon, and we are back with part 2 of Day 4 Cloud Summit 2021. What an amazing part 1 of Day 4 we have had. We did talk about Azure SQL, we talked about Blazor, we have talked about Azure Secure DevOps, serverless, and I'm really excited for the part 2 of Day 4, as I can go far and say that Day 4 of Cloud Summit is one of my favorite days, because I have absolutely amazing speakers today lined up. The second part is going to be power packed, and we are streaming on multiple platforms. We're streaming on C# Corner, we're streaming on C# Live, we're streaming on Microsoft Developers YouTube channel, we're streaming on Learn TV. And here's a quick fact that until now, we have crossed over 60,000 unique audiences in just 3.5 days. Can you believe that? There have been around 70,000 unique registrations for this event. And yeah, this is getting bigger and bigger thanks to all the speakers and attendees. Having said that, this reminds me that I have been looking in the comments. You all have been very kind to each other, and I want you all to continue that and follow code of conduct. And a quick reminder that there's always 3 contests going on, that whenever you ask a question to a speaker using the comments, use #CloudSummit. This way we can find winners towards the end of the day. Also, take a screen grab, take a selfie, be creative, tag us on Cloud Summit Live on Twitter and LinkedIn using #Cloud Summit Live, and we'll make sure we pick one winner from each social media destinations, and we'll announce it towards the end of the day. Having said that, it's time to go ahead and invite our keynote speaker of the day, Vishwas Lele, who is a Microsoft Regional Director. Yeah, and he's going to talk about, his keynote is going to be on driving cloud values, lessons from the last decade in the cloud. Absolutely amazing. So fasten your seatbelts, as this is going to be an absolutely amazing keynote. Hi, Vishwas. Welcome to Cloud Summit 2021.
Hi, Simon. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the kind introduction.
I really appreciate Vishwas for accepting the invitation, and I'm really looking forward for your session that's about the journey of cloud in past 10 years. I know already we are a couple of minutes in your session, so we're gonna chat towards the end. All right. Yep. And I already see you have your screen shared. I'm gonna add it to the stream. Everybody can see it, and next 25 minutes is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon, and thank you for the audiences. The numbers that Simon was talking about is amazing, shows you what the interest is in the cloud, and I thank you for all your time. I was thinking a lot about today's session. I have about 20 minutes or so, and I do want to keep some time for some Q&A at the end. So I was thinking about what we should talk about. There have been excellent sessions. There was yesterday. Simon talked about all of the various topics, and then we have various sessions today and later in the week. So I was thinking, how can I give you, for all of those attending today, some of the lessons that I've collected over the last few years working in the cloud. So let us get started. As you can see on the screen, the title of my talk, which I changed a few times, is Driving Cloud Value Lessons from the Last Decade. So what do I mean last decade? September 2021 is an interesting month because it marks the 15 years when AWS S3, the first service in AWS, was launched almost 15 years ago. And interestingly enough, and my own humble journey with the cloud for me started in 2007, and I did not have any notion of this becoming this big. Somebody threw me into a project, started working on it, liked it, and that's been sort of the journey. And today, if you look at it, the transformational benefits of the cloud are well established. I don't think we need to talk about the importance and benefits. I think those are well established. And in fact, all you have to do is look at the revenue or the consumption of the top 3 cloud providers, something like $200 billion in 2021. And if you look at this number, significant number, but if you look at this number against sort of the global IT spend, which is something like $2 or $3 trillion. So you can take it from there that even though we've made a lot of progress in the cloud, many chapters of this book about cloud computing remain yet to be written. And one observation that I'll share with you is when a technology like cloud becomes popular, it becomes so pervasive that it ultimately becomes invisible, right? So already, if you are paying close attention to what is happening in the cloud with the announcement of things like the Microsoft Cloud for healthcare, for retail, we're already seeing a transition into a dedicated vertical focus cloud where you have these value add services, right? So healthcare monitoring, healthcare payments and billing, and these kinds of capabilities are part of the cloud built in. So we're already seeing that transition happen. But in any case, let me bring the talk back to what I'm here to communicate over the next few minutes, which is what are some of the lessons that I have learned and I've learned through interacting with my colleagues at AIS, through our customers, and more importantly, even the community. We've collectively learned a lot, and I just wanted to share 10 simple ideas. These are not exhaustive by any means, but these are the ones that I came up with as I was preparing for today's talk. So one thing is very clear, that cloud providers are creating so many new features. Something like 2,000 to 3,000 features are being rolled out every year. And you probably heard of a term called cloud entropy, and that cloud entropy is real. You know, the changes that are happening is real. So cloud consumers and even large cloud consumers, large companies, enterprises, even they don't have the resources to keep track of what is happening, what the new features are coming out. So as a result, I feel that what we should focus on is building a strong cloud foundation. And let me give you some examples of the things that I want to talk about in terms of building the strong cloud foundation. So there's about 10 things that I want to talk about. Let's get started. First and foremost, I would say that you should look at your application portfolio and then make a decision about 3 to 5 architectural blueprints that can support 80% of your workloads, right? You have to take this craziness of new services all the time and boil it down to 3 or 5 key blueprints and then match them up against the kinds of applications you have. Look at your application portfolio and say, I'm going to double down on these blueprints. And then furthermore, once you have doubled down on those blueprints, you have to make sure that you give your users a simple, consistent way to provision these architectural blueprints, right? And we've heard terms like cloud vending machine or IT vending machine. So once you've taken these blueprints and you've packaged them up, you should have a way for people to walk up to this vending machine and be able to simply get a copy of that blueprint. Okay, let me give you a concrete example. So you've determined that a certain class of applications are fit for serverless. And then you've also determined that in order to be having the right security in place, you want that serverless function to be VNet joined, has to have this construct, private endpoints, whatnot. You figured that part out. That's one architectural blueprint. You don't want everybody to be going in and spinning that up on themselves. You take that blueprint, you write an automation script, language of your choice, Terraform, ARM, whatever you want, PowerShell. Make sure it is available for people to walk up and then get a copy of that. That's what I mean by consistency. And you have to treat this automation as a first-class citizen. So you have to think about resilience. So when you're deploying, even if you're deploying the serverless application with some storage account, you have to think about resilience. You're spreading that out across availability zones. You have to think about observability. Do you have the right monitoring enabled already? You have to think about security and the zero trust concept where you assume that a breach has happened. So as you're writing these automation scripts in conjunction with those blueprints that I was talking about, these things are important to have. So that's number one, that's consistency. Number two is cost optimization, and I'm seeing a lot of this. People get excited, they jump into the cloud. First of all, some people are disappointed because they went into the cloud thinking it was a reduction in cost. It is really not reduction in cost. Cloud is about accelerating the time to value. That's how you have to go in. And once you're in the cloud, as you become mature in the cloud, your cost maturity will come. But what I'm seeing today is a lot of companies have gone into the cloud, have not put the right controls in place, don't have the tagging strategy in place, don't have all of the governance policies, don't have anomaly detection. Why is suddenly this service costing me so much? Because somebody changed some knobs somewhere. And then equally importantly, of course, there are services like cost management today, but then does the cost, can it be broken up into a manner that aligns with your organizational hierarchy? So you've broken it up, maybe you're doing product-based development, you've broken it up by the products. Is the cloud cost aligned with the hierarchies that you've set up for your organization? Really important. And one word of caution, I was reading somewhere that a significant percentage, maybe even 20 to 30% of cloud consumption is waste. People did not put the right controls in place or let a resource stay on longer than it was needed. So that's becoming very important. And CFOs around the companies are getting more strict about, why am I seeing this spend go out of control? So you have to be very cognizant of that. Next one is security. Resources in the cloud are dynamic. They come and go. We are provisioning these through the API. So your security monitoring has to be dynamic. No question about that. So when I talked about the architectural blueprints, I talked about how you must make sure those blueprints are secure from the start. But that's only the first step. You have to continuously monitor those resources so that they stay compliant with your security needs. And the only way to achieve that in the cloud is thinking of security as code. What do I mean by that? You have to have jobs in place that are constantly running. So many of the failures in the cloud are configuration-related errors. So you have to have jobs that are constantly scanning those configurations of the applications that you're deploying and making sure that you're not having a drift from a compliant state. So security, of course, is important. Let me talk about data gravity. And I don't know if you've heard of the term data gravity. It was introduced in 2013. And the idea is that your applications tend to get closer over a period of time, tend to get closer to the data. Makes sense, right? You want to reduce latency. So that's what the notion of data gravity is. So as we have started talking about multi-cloud, and there's an interesting paper that came out which talked about 80% of Fortune 500 companies are multi-cloud, either through acquisition or different business units deciding on a different technology. And one of the impediments that you will run in, and of course, Kubernetes and things like that allow you at least a chance. Of course, a lot more work needs to be done, but give you a chance to move your applications across different providers or even on-prem. And things like Azure Arc, AWS Outpost, and things like that allow you a single control plane for your cloud. Right? But because of data gravity, because it's so hard to take your applications and move it further away from the data, it is an impediment to truly achieving a multi-cloud. And I should be careful when I talk about multi-cloud, I'm talking about an organization that is deploying a similar class of applications across more than one cloud provider. I'm not talking about, I have Salesforce and I have M365 and I have Azure. That's not my definition or industry's definition of multi-cloud. Let's keep going. I'm about 10 minutes into my session and we've covered about 3 or 4. So I'll speed up a little bit. The next topic that I want to talk about is inclusiveness. And you'll probably be surprised by this, but what I mean to say here is that cloud is not just for professional developers or professional infrastructure engineers. We need to be, when we are designing the cloud, when we are designing the governance structure, when we are designing the self-service capability, when we are designing the network topology, we need to be inclusive towards a growing community of citizen developers. We know a lot of these applications today. IT is not able to keep up. The demand for applications is very high. Consequently, citizen developers and low-code, no-code platforms are filling in that gap. It is important as we design these cloud constructs that it should be possible for someone to take a low-code, no-code construct and then be able to commingle it with a far lower level platform construct. So that's really important as we think about this, because in order to achieve all of the application needs that organizations have, low code, no code, and citizen developers are going to play an important part. Let me go to the next one, data analytics. So you're thinking about migrating your applications to the cloud. You're reimagining your applications for the cloud. Maybe you're refactoring some of those applications. Maybe you're rewriting those applications as cloud native applications. Keep in mind that these applications that you're moving to the cloud are going to be an immense source for some data analytics down the road. So if you can plan for those analytics scenarios up front, what do I mean by that? So these applications that you're porting or rewriting or refactoring for the cloud, these applications need to expose the data. So think about data ingestion. How are you going to take the data out and go into an analytics store like a warehouse or a data lake? How are you going to do the transformation? And some of you have probably seen architectures like data mesh. And think of data mesh as microservices style architecture for data. So what it means is you are treating data essentially as a product. So there's always this chasm between I have this operational data and this analytics data. And architectures like data mesh are moving towards a model where you have a domain essentially responsible for making the data, whether it is operational analytics, available as a product to the other teams. So as you're migrating these applications, think about this aspect as well. The next thing I wanted to talk about is the cloud operating model. So if you have traditional infrastructure needs, networking needs, and security needs. All of these skill sets, they need to be operating in a cloud model. What do I mean by that? So you may be a network person, you may be a security person, you may be an infrastructure person, but if you are not embracing an iterative development model, if you're not embracing DevSecOps, you're not treating network as code or security as code and version control and checking and unit tests, you're not treating it as code, as first-class citizens, you simply cannot succeed in the cloud. So if you are taking a traditional IT operating mindset to the cloud, you just cannot succeed in the cloud. So it's really important to, as you work with folks from these different communities, and some of you may be network infrastructure and security teams, it's really important to start moving towards a cloud operating model. So I'm down to the last 2 items. We've covered 8 lessons that are important to apply as we move into the next decade or more of the cloud. The next one is quite obvious, is continuous learning. So many of you are working in the cloud already. Many of your coworkers are working in the cloud already. You may have become fluent with cloud basics. You understand IaaS, PaaS, you understand software-driven network, you understand the APIs, you understand the services. But you need to take your knowledge to the next level, and that can only happen through rigorous continuous learning and upskilling programs. So if you're a cloud professional and if you're not subscribing to things like LinkedIn Learning, Pluralsight, you name it, there are dozens of these learning platforms. There are YouTube videos. There are great content that is put out by the providers. The Azure team puts out great content. If you're not spending time, you're not embedding a culture of learning within your organization, it will be very hard to achieve cloud transformation goals. Cloud is changing rapidly. You have to be able to keep up with that learning. And then with that, I come to the last point in my presentation. And this point goes hand in hand with the previous one I mentioned, which was continuous learning. So along with continuous learning, and I see this with many organizations as well, you have upskilling programs, but you also, in addition to that, you need some sort of a cloud sandbox. And I'm not just talking about MSDN accounts that I have this $100 a month or $150 a month, depending on your MSDN subscription. I'm talking about a true sandbox that your organization has set up, which gives you the freedom to experiment and, frankly, freedom to fail. You need an enterprise cloud sandbox, which gives you an ability to collaborate with your coworkers, which gives you the freedom to experiment with these services. And it also gives you an ability to test out these preview capabilities that are coming out. So, for example, you have an architecture already in place, and I'll take the example that I'd used previously. Private endpoints are becoming really important. I'm sure you've looked at that. If you have not, you should look into that. Private endpoints sort of give you the best of both worlds, right? You have a service like Azure SQL database or storage, but you can lock it down to your virtual network. That's essentially, there's more to private endpoints than what I've just described. But if you don't have a sandbox where you can try these things out within hours, not days and weeks, it'll be really hard to incorporate these capabilities that are coming out and learn about that and bring them into your projects and your applications. So that concludes a few of the lessons that I thought are important. I'm going to pause here and I'm going to go back to Simon and see if there are some questions that we can take or how he wants to address this. So go ahead, Simon.
Thank you, Vishwas. That was absolutely amazing. I did love that how you covered the entire some of the pillars that of cloud while talking about the security and all that. We don't have any questions for the keynote, but I really appreciate all that you have shared and your time for today. Thank you so much. And any final thing you want to plug in before we move to the next session?
Yeah, thank you. One point that, as I mentioned to you, I was thinking about this keynote till late last night, and I was jotting these points down, and I was tweaking what I had to say, because there's a lot you can say about each of those bullets, Simon, as you can imagine. And one thing that I did leave out yesterday, because I thought I may not have time, but now that we have a couple of minutes, I do want to go back to it. My first bullet was that figure out key patterns, like 3 or 5. Don't confuse yourself with constantly changing architectural blueprints. Look at your application portfolio, figure out a set of architectural blueprints, stick to them, make them robust. So I've said that. But one thing I would like to add in conjunction to that is having some sort of a COE or center of excellence. And center of excellence sometimes means different things to different people, and it sounds like a fancy term. Whatever you want to call it does not matter. But it is really important to have a core group of people who are constantly looking out for what is coming down the pike. What are the new capabilities? So this observation that pick 3 or 5 architectural patterns and stick to them goes in conjunction with having a core group of people who are really interested in sort of pushing the envelope, constantly look at what is coming out. Because what you don't want to happen is you don't want to be caught flat-footed if a new service comes around that is completely disruptive, or perhaps an architecturally significant enhancement is made to a service that you're already using, right? You may be using a service, you may not be knowing, but there's an architecturally significant enhancement. And I'll give you an example, logic apps, right? You may be using logic apps for a long time. There's a significant change that has happened to logic apps called the self-hosted model. So up until now, logic apps has been available as a PaaS platform, but now you can take logic apps and host it into a compute environment of your choice, whether it is Kubernetes or someplace else, or on-prem even. If you don't have a core group that is looking out for what is changing, you may miss out on an important benefit that can have a big impact on your project. So make sure you do both. So that was the last point. Thank you for this additional opportunity to mention this last point as well.
No, Vishwas, I definitely agree that the continuous learning that you had one in your slide, that is super, super important. Things are changing very rapidly, especially the cloud. We see Azure being updated every other day, I should say every day. So it definitely makes sense to keep yourself and your team updated on what are the changes that's happening. Thank you so much once again, Vishwas. It's always lovely hosting you, and we would love to have you back whenever available. You and your team is growing continuously. I stay updated on LinkedIn. So congratulations on that. And yeah, have a good day ahead. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Simon.
All right, with that absolutely amazing keynote by Vishwas Lele, we now move to our next session. But before we move it, we do have a couple of minutes, and I see many more people joining. People are joining us from Zimbabwe. People are joining us from Cuba. I don't know what this place is, but please welcome Alina. And yeah, welcome everyone. This is Cloud Summit 2021, day 4, part 2. Yeah, the second part is going to be really, really exciting. You had an amazing keynote by Vishwas Lele. And now we move to our next session. That's by Thomas Maurer, who is a Microsoft Cloud advocate. I do remember I hosted him back in 2020 in the month of November, and it's been almost 10 months. So, he's a really busy person. Even the last time, it took me very long to bring him to a live show. And in today's session, he's going to talk about Azure Hybrid, learn about hybrid cloud management with Azure. And to be honest, what a community rockstar he is. Follow him on Twitter and LinkedIn, and his tweets and posts always get hundreds and hundreds of views. Might don't even get even 10. Let's welcome Thomas Maurer. Oh my goodness. Hi, Thomas. Welcome to Cloud Summit 2021.
Hi, Simon. Thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to speak today at Cloud Summit.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Thomas, for accepting the invitation. I've been looking at you on social media. You are packed with the events and you're really, really busy. By the way, how was your summer this year?
Oh, it was very good. It was very good. Very exciting stuff happening for me personally, as well as work-wise. So, no, doing really, really well. It was a very good summer. I hope you had a very good summer too.
Yeah, here in India, we don't celebrate we don't do a lot about summer because it's very hot anyway. We do kind of in this winter time. But yeah, Thomas, I'm really excited to learn about hybrid cloud. And let me tell you, hybrid cloud DevOps, this is the two topics that people really wanted to learn when we took the registration. So I'm definitely looking forward for your session. I see you have already shared your screen. I have added it to the stream now. Everybody can see it. And next 25 minutes is all yours.
Thank you very much, Simon. This is awesome. So yeah, my name is Thomas Maurer. I'm going to speak to you today about hybrid cloud management. And I probably need to extend this and not just say hybrid cloud, but also multi-cloud management, right? Because we are not just limiting this to Azure and on-premises. We're actually enabling this also if you run in a multi-cloud environment. And we'll talk about that in just a bit. So let me dive into this presentation. And again, I'm not necessarily going to show a lot of slides. I have a couple of them to illustrate a couple of things, but I want to show you some cool demos as well. So before I actually go into the demos, I want to quickly outline why we're actually doing this and why this is such a big deal, right? So we did some research and obviously we figured out that like customer environments get increasingly complex, right? There's a lot of change happening with the cloud, but also with new technologies. And so we are seeing like customers working with hundreds and if not thousands of applications and managing these and taking advantage of these. And these can be very modern applications. They can run on PaaS services, containerized, even serverless apps. But then we also have a lot of traditional applications running in virtual machines or even physical hosts. We also see customers obviously using different types of infrastructure. They use their own data centers. They have their branch offices, factories, retail stores, edge locations. They use hosters for their workloads. So there's a ton of things happening, and they obviously need to have management for that as well. And then last but not least, what I already mentioned is the multi-cloud approach, right? We have customers who are, some of them are probably strategic in a multi-cloud environment. Other customers, they just started with one cloud provider and then later on, for example, switched to Azure, which by the way is a fantastic choice. But then they're probably not going to migrate everything right to Azure, and they still need to be in control of everything, even though they choose multiple providers. And so this obviously adds a lot of complexity. And we want to make sure that we, not just in terms of management, but also in terms of security and compliance and app deployments, for example, and cloud architecture in general can make it easy or easier for customers in that sense. So before I dive into Azure Arc, I also want to quickly speak out and say, hey, there's obviously a lot of reasons why customers are in a hybrid environment. There are probably there are reasons why they can't use the cloud. And so we want to help them to enable them wherever they are, right? If they have data sovereignty challenges, if they have network challenges where they have not a lot of bandwidth to Azure, or they don't want to rely on the internet connectivity for their workloads to run, there are reasons. And we offer a large set of services and products to actually enable our customers. It's not just one product which does hybrid, but in the set, we have a set of different solutions out there for our customers. Let's think about IoT, right? We have a rich set of IoT solutions. We have our Azure Stack family, which provides you with cloud-inspired infrastructure wherever you need it. And then obviously we talk about Azure Arc, and Azure Arc is actually one part of that is bringing Azure services to any infrastructure. So when a customer cannot use an Azure service in Azure, we try to bring that service to the customer. And then last but not least, that's what we're going to talk mostly about is the Azure control plane using Azure Arc, right? So that you actually can manage everything in a single control plane. And so let's dive into what Azure Arc is. And I quickly, one sentence. So if you look at what Azure Arc is, it's really extending the Azure management and Azure services to anywhere, right? And this is absolutely key because, again, customers are not just running their workloads in one place. They're probably running their workloads in different locations. They take advantage of the cloud. They build hybrid and multi-cloud applications and architectures. So that is where Azure Arc really comes into the game. And we offer different tool sets for this. So, for example, one is about exactly having that control, getting that central visibility, and operations and compliance tools. But then also, obviously, we want to enable customers to bring these cloud native apps to anywhere and help them, for example, managing their Kubernetes clusters or deploying apps to these. And then, obviously, if customers want to build applications running our PaaS services, for example, they should also be able to do that. Not just in Azure, but also outside of Azure. So how do we do this? And how do we look at this in general? And let's dive into the technology a little bit. So with Azure, we have this great control plane, right? Where we actually can manage all our Azure resources. Now, our customers told us, okay, hey, this is so great. I really get like a single control plane to manage all my Azure cloud resources. But what about the resources which are outside of Azure? And so that is what we actually brought in. So we are speaking about two different things here. So one is what we call the Azure Arc enabled infrastructure. And that allows you to connect existing infrastructures such as servers and Kubernetes clusters, or Microsoft SQL Server, for example, to the Azure control plane using Azure Arc, and then take advantage of the Azure management services such as Security Center, update management, monitoring, and many, many more. And then the other part where we're going to have a quick look at today is the Azure Arc enabled services part. So this is actually where we then enable customers to actually deploy Azure services wherever they need them. So instead of talking all of that on slides, let's just give you a quick look how that actually can look like. So here I am in the Azure portal, and you can see here I'm in the all resources page, right? And so you can see here every resource I have deployed in Azure. And everything basically has a name, has a type. You can see here it can be a VM, it can be a virtual disk, a database, even public IP addresses, for example, are an object, right? And they're usually part of a resource group. They're deployed or joined to a location, and then they're part of a subscription as well. And you can obviously use tagging for that as well. Now, our customers told us, hey, this is great. But again, where are the resources which are outside of Azure? And so to actually illustrate that, what I want to show you here is let's quickly filter for to list all my servers, right? So servers which are running in Azure, but also servers which are running outside of Azure. And you can see here, if I look for Arc, I can actually see I have a couple of Arc servers here already joined, and I will tell you a little bit more how I did that. But then obviously not just my Arc machines, I also want to have my Azure virtual machines here. So if I select these two, I can now see them, all my servers side by side in that single view. And you can see here, the blue ones are the Arc, are the Azure virtual machines, as you know them. And then we have the other ones here, which are my servers, which are running outside of Azure. But you can also see that they're basically part of a resource group. They're also part of a subscription, and they show up as an Azure resource, right? I can even use features like tagging, for example, here. So if I select a tag, like for example, cost center, I can select, okay, I want to see all my servers which are like part of these three specific cost centers. And if I hit that, I can take advantage of the Azure, native Azure capabilities for tagging as well. And that is because it is now a native Azure resource, right? Even though the server is running outside of Azure, we still create that native resource in Azure, so you can take advantage of all of that. You now might say, well, Thomas, this is great to get some visibility, right? But I need to do more. And I completely agree with that. So one thing I want to show you here is when it comes to compliance. So for that, we are using Azure Policy. And Azure Policy is really there to get control over your Azure environment. But what a lot of people don't know, there's a feature called Azure Policy Guest Configuration, which also helps you to not just configure the Azure environment, but also, for example, if you run virtual machines within Azure, to actually control the operating system, right? Think about group policies on steroids in an example. And with Azure Arc, we can now extend this to resources which are outside of Azure. Now, I can simply go and have a set of policies which we already have built in for compliance reasons. Like if I go, for example, to create a new assignment here, I can basically select an initiative here, which is basically the policies, different policies here. So you can, as you can see, you can define your custom ones, but we have a set of built-in ones, which are probably very interesting to you. And some of them are technology focused, right? Like let's make sure that Defender for SQL agents on virtual machines is deployed and so on. But then we also have a lot of them who are actually based on industry certificates. So, for example, we have for FedRAMP, we have ISO, PCI, IRS, UK NHS, and so on, which you can select. Now, in my case, I deployed a very simple one, which actually goes out and audits virtual machines or physical servers as well, like servers in general for insecure password settings. So I could set this up now, but that would take obviously a while. And so what I'm going to do here is, like in a good cooking show, I already prepared this policy, right? So we don't have to wait for it. So if I want to now see my compliance state of my environment, I can simply hit compliance. And now you can see a couple of different things. First thing, you can see that I'm actually doing a very bad job when it comes to compliance. And secondly, you can see here all the actual policies assigned. And if I click on this one, this is actually the one I just showed you. And you can see here I'm not compliant with that. And if I scroll down, I could even see the different policies itself, for example, password age and password length and so on, which are not configured the right way. Now, this is obviously interesting to know, but if I'm in charge of compliance, I also want to see like what resources are actually not compliant, what servers are not compliant. And so if I hit on compliance button, I can now see here, okay, these are the servers which are not compliant. And if I have a closer look here, I can see these are my Azure VMs. Here you can see resource type Microsoft.compute/virtual machines. And as well, my Arc service. So this is Microsoft.hybrid compute machines. And so I can see here, I basically have a compliant view about all my resources. And again, this is not just limited to servers. We can also look at, for example, SQL servers or Kubernetes clusters as well, and then do much, much more. Now, how do we actually do this? Or what did I just show you? So if I go back to the slide deck quickly, and no worries, there are more demos to come. What I just showed you here is a high-level architecture of how Azure works. So when we are working with Azure as a customer, we're basically using tools and experience like the portal, the CLI, PowerShell APIs, and so on to actually interact with Azure Resource Manager. Now, Azure Resource Manager provides all these great benefits to manage resources at a large scale, right? Like tags, grouping, subscription management, role-based access control, policies, logs, and so on. And if you look at then, we also offer a ton of different management services like monitoring, update management, containers, and so on, to actually manage these Azure resources, right? But again, customers do not just have Azure resources. And so what they did before was they have their own management tools, their existing management tooling to manage resources which are running on premises or at other cloud providers. Now, with Azure Arc, we're basically building that bridge between the Azure Resource Manager and the resources which are outside of Azure. So you can actually get a representation of all this stuff within Azure. And you cannot just use it in the portal. You can also use that using ARM templates. You can use that using the CLI or PowerShell and so on. And you can still keep on using your existing tooling, right? We don't want to create any dependencies which are like for your business critical applications if you don't need to, right? You can still use them, but you get that extended benefit basically using our management tools. So what can we actually manage if I talk about Azure Arc enabled infrastructure? So we have, for example, servers, Azure Arc enabled servers, so we can manage that. We can actually manage Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes clusters and Azure SQL servers. And I'm going to show you that in just a bit here. So let me quickly go back to the demo here. So how do I actually manage that? If I go to the Azure Arc page, or the Azure Arc Center within the Azure portal, this is the one place where you would go to manage all your Arc resources. So what you can do here is you could onboard new servers and new infrastructure, new Kubernetes clusters, and then they will show up in the Azure portal. Now, what does that actually mean? How do I onboard the resources? It's very simple. Basically, what you need to do is download the agent, install the agent, and register it like that machine or that Kubernetes cluster with Azure. That's very simple. And we help you by generating a script to do so. And then the machine, after a couple of minutes, it will pop up in the Azure portal. And you can see here it looks like this. So, for example, if I click here on one of my servers, you can see here it actually now looks like an Azure resource, right? It's part of a resource group. It's part of a subscription. You can also see some additional local information here. That server is actually running in my local data center, or basically underneath my desk here. And then you can see here on the left side, we get all the good stuff you get from all the Azure resources, like the activity log to audit, like who has done what. We get role-based access control, so we can actually take advantage of Azure Active Directory to see who has access to that resource or enable people to have access to that resource. We can do like things like get security center recommendations. So for example, here, you can see here that like there are a couple of things I need to do. I can also, for example, take advantage of extensions. So I can deploy, for example, a custom script extension to deploy a script to that machine. Or I can take advantage of, for example, log analytics and Azure Monitor to actually get some monitoring information here from that specific system. So you can see here that this server doesn't do a lot, but you can see here CPU utilization, memory utilization, disk and network utilization as well, right? I can also get a dependency view and much, much more here. I can also do some update management. So if I want to patch that server, I can directly do this and control this out of the Azure portal. So you can see here that this actually is not compliant because this server has missing patches. So I could actually go out and just deploy schedule a new update deployment. Again, there's much, much more to show. But what I want to show you next is like the Kubernetes cluster management, right? So I also have a couple of Kubernetes cluster running outside of Azure, and I want to manage these as well. So what I can do here is I can actually go out and have a look at this cluster here. You can see here on the left side, I also get all the good stuff like monitoring policies and all that stuff, security center, all the stuff or a lot of stuff I also get for server. But then what I want to show you here is how we can actually manage apps and do a GitOps integration to actually manage that. So if I look at GitOps here, I can actually deploy that configuration and say, hey, I want to deploy, for example, an application to that Kubernetes cluster. So what I did here is I have a Git repository down here where my application and my application configuration is stored. And I said basically to my Kubernetes cluster, okay, pull that application from there and then look for changes to that application. And so as soon as there is a change, please also apply that to the cluster. And so what I can show you, I took all my skills basically to create a new application here, which is basically a very simple application. It says, let me quickly refresh here. It says hello. So that is what the application does. And then I want to change that. I want to say, like, it should not just say hello here. It should say hello Cloud Summit. So what I go here and change that. So this is my Git repo. And now I'm doing something. Please don't repeat that at home. This is really just for me right now. So I'm going to directly do a change in the main branch here. So let's say hello Cloud Summit. Now, well, since I'm still a good admin, I'm still going to at least do commit message here and then commit that change. And again, don't do that at home. It also works with obviously approval steps and different branches and so on. But now if I go back, what you can see here in this config, this now goes out every 3 seconds basically to see if there is a change. And so we can see here, okay, go from that Git repo and basically look for that change. And if I now go back and talked long enough, if I now refresh my application here, you can see here it says hello Cloud Summit. So I can do a couple of different things there, obviously, not just changing like a message, but this, like, you get the example, the idea of that. So there's much, much more we can do, but let's go quickly back to the slides. What else we can do, or have a quick summary on what we can do here. So with Azure Arc, we can actually manage servers. Again, you saw that, how that works, how we can organize and take advantage of the security features and management features we have with Azure Arc. We can do the same thing or similar things, or even more, if you will, in some cases for Azure Arc-enabled Kubernetes clusters, where we can actually go out and do, for example, that GitOps deployment, where we can do monitoring of our Kubernetes clusters, as we can do it, like, for example, as we do with an AKS cluster, right? But we can do that with Kubernetes clusters outside of Azure, running basically on premises or even at other cloud providers. And then we can also connect to these clusters. So if you need to do some configuration changes, if an admin or a developer needs to go out and do some changes, we can do that as well. So that is pretty cool stuff we can do there. So this is one part about hybrid cloud management, right? We get that single control plane. We can attach existing resources to it, like servers and Kubernetes clusters, and then actually go out and manage these and take advantage of that cloud native management tooling we have in Azure. The other part I promised you is the Azure Arc enabled services part. And that basically allows us to deploy services to resources or deploy Azure services outside of Azure. So let me quickly show you how that can look like. So again, if I go back to the Azure Arc page here, we had here the infrastructure management, but then on the bottom, you can see here the services, right? So these are some of the services we currently Arc enabled. And what we have here is an interesting piece here. So we call that custom locations. So in my case, I defined 2 Kubernetes clusters as custom locations where I now can go out and deploy Azure resources. So to quickly show you how that could look like is here, if I create a new app service, I could just create new. And then I would obviously select a resource group. Let's select this one, and then maybe give that a name. So let's see. Let's do Cloud Summit. And then I need to choose a region, right? Where do I want to deploy this? And this is nothing new. You have seen that before. But the cool part here is that I cannot just select an Azure region. I could also select now my custom region, my custom locations, right? So these are now basically in my own data center. You can see here Tom's data center. That doesn't really sound like a Azure region, right? Or I can even do that to another, deploy that to another cloud provider. So how cool is that? I can now deploy a large amount of Azure services, not just in Azure, but also at other locations. So I could go out and go through, obviously, the setup. I can also, again, use ARM templates to do that. I can use like the CLIs to deploy that as well. I can use native tooling within Visual Studio Code, for example, as well. So if I want to use that, I can do that as well. So that is pretty cool stuff we have there as well. And so with that, let me quickly talk a little bit what's actually there. So in this case, I saw when we talked about Azure Application Services, which are currently in preview. So you can go out and deploy, for example, app service functions, logic apps, API management, event grid outside of Azure, which is pretty awesome. And then this obviously enables a couple of different scenarios for developers where now you cannot just build these cloud native applications in Azure, but then also take that and bring that back to like basically any infrastructure where you want to run it. But it's not just about applications, right? Most applications also need databases. So one thing which is also already generally available is Azure Arc enabled data services. And this allows you, for example, to run Azure SQL managed instances in these places as well. And then you get not just a SQL database, but you get actually the Azure SQL experience as a managed service where we take care of the updating process, of the security and so on. And you can actually go out and deploy that. And the only thing you actually need is a Kubernetes cluster, right? So you need to have an on-prem Kubernetes cluster or a Kubernetes cluster running another cloud provider as well, and then connect that, define that as a custom region, as I just showed you, and then you can actually go out and deploy that. In the terms of data services, you can even go and do that in a disconnected environment as well. So what does that give you? So if you think about if you're a cloud architect or developer, you can now use your existing tooling and your existing skills to actually deploy these services or these applications to your infrastructure using, for example, the GitOps techniques to deploy to your Kubernetes cluster. But then you can also take advantage of the Azure services, of the cloud native services, for example, like Azure SQL and functions and web apps, and keep on doing that. Doesn't matter where they're actually running. So this gives you the kind of like flexibility you want to have there. Now, one last thing I actually want to mention. If you, for example, want to deploy this now in your data center, you're saying, well, I don't have the knowledge really to like build up a Kubernetes cluster, right? I don't just want to, for example, do that. We also offer a solution called Azure Stack HCI, and this is basically an infrastructure solution doing virtualization where you can then run Windows and Linux VMs and then run different applications inside these VMs, right? This is also a great solution if you look at VDI and so on. But a service which we also bring to Azure Stack HCI is AKS. So the Azure Kubernetes service cannot just run in Azure, but can also run on Azure Stack HCI. And so that enables you then to run basically all the containers or containerized applications you have. But then also the Azure Arc enabled services I just showed you in your own data center locations, and then obviously build your cloud native applications. And this is great because AKS on Azure Stack HCI, again, is kind of like deployed as a service on top of it. Very easy to deploy, to go forward with it, and you can deploy that in your own data center, and you don't need to have all this like I build it by myself experience. So you can have the full stack Microsoft if you want to. But again, it's not necessary, right? You can also just use other Kubernetes clusters like OpenShift and so on to do similar things as well. So with that, I just want to tell you a little bit where you can find more before I'm actually done. So if you're looking at like this hybrid and multi-cloud approach and want to dive deeper into what I just told you, especially when it also comes to management, have a look at the Cloud Adoption Framework. We now have a special scenario for hybrid and multi-cloud guidance, basically, where we actually bring you that information. And this is, again, a lot of awesome stuff we basically developed together with our customers, the engineering teams, and so on, focusing especially on these hybrid and multi-cloud approaches, talking about the control plane and so on. And then we have a ton of different services, additional information like Microsoft Learn. Highly recommend to check that out. We have reference architectures and so on. So there's much, much more to learn. Again, I have a couple of links inside here where you can actually go and find more. Also check out Microsoft Docs. And last but not least, check out the Azure Arc Jumpstart guide to actually deploy quickly these different technologies. So with that, I want to say thank you. I hope that provide you a great overview.
All right, Thomas, that was an absolutely amazing session, although it went over my head, but looks like you covered the entire ecosystem of Azure Arc. To be honest, I really loved your slides. I really loved your slides. So, Thomas, you are in a very fancy designation, right? Where we did discuss that you work both with the engineers and you get to work with the customers, right? So while working with this hybrid ecosystem, right, what is a big challenge or a debate you get to face with the customers? Any one point you would like to bring from your experience?
Yeah, so there's always, I think, a debate when it comes to like security and stuff like that, right? And what I see now, what happened over the past couple of years was like we had this, like in the past, we had this discussion, okay, is the cloud secure, right? And now this conversation slightly shifted away and saying, hey, how can I use the cloud to make my on-premises environment more secure, right? So people start to see the value of the cloud, and actually it's not just like to move everything to the cloud. It's really coming down to actually take advantage of the cloud and make your on-premises environment even better.
Right, makes sense. Let's answer this one from a bird eye view, right? Thomas, what are the requirements to connect private servers, those not directly connected to the internet, to the cloud?
So Azure Arc currently needs to basically have a connectivity to the Azure control plane, right? As I mentioned, you deploy that Arc agent, and that Arc agent can be connected through different ways. So first of all, you can have that over outgoing traffic on port 443, so it's HTTPS encrypted in that sense, that we basically just need to access some of the Azure APIs. However, we know that some customers obviously don't want to allow direct internet access, so we have two other options. So we have also the way that you can connect through a proxy server, if you have that, so you can actually enable that as well. Or if you really want to have not necessarily even going through the internet, you can set up, for example, if you have an express route or a VPN connection, you can actually use a private endpoint or a Azure private link configuration. So the Azure Arc agent takes advantage of your VPN or your express route connection. So in that sense, it doesn't even, like, if in the sense of Azure Express route. It doesn't even connect through the public internet.
Well, that makes sense. Looks like Azure Arc team has been working a lot. Any way you want, you can go ahead and connect your services to the Azure. Thomas, that was an absolutely amazing session. Any final thing you want to plug in before we move to the next session?
Now, I just want to say thank you. And again, for everyone looking out at these hybrid architectures, please make sure you check out the Cloud Adoption Framework. And you can also find a lot of content on Microsoft Learn.
Yeah, thank you so much, Thomas. Absolutely amazing. As always, I would always love to host you back once again. I hope I don't have to wait for another 10 months. Thomas, thank you so much. Have an absolutely amazing day ahead and week and the rest of the time. And I'll see you some other time. Thank you so much. And ta-ra, bye. Take care.
Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you.
All right, we now move from one cloud advocate to a session of another cloud advocate. It's by Henk. For those who follow a C# corner, right? We and Henk work very closely together, but I don't get to host Henk very often because I believe all cloud advocates are very busy, and I'm hosting Henk only for the second time in past 18 to 19 months. So I'm really excited for this session because Henk is going to talk about what's new with Azure machine learning. And if you just go ahead and look at Microsoft ecosystem of AI and machine learning, there's a lot that you can do in that entire ecosystem. The designers, the notebooks, and whatnot, they have it. So to talk about today is Henk, and let's welcome our next speaker. Hi, Henk. Welcome to Cloud Summit 2021.
Hey, hello. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I just realized I was looking at the video and I just checked your LinkedIn. How was the very first episode of, what we call it, A Bit of AI Season 2?
Oh, yeah, that one was really good. It all worked, still worked. So so that was good. And we had a really amazing guest that did some really cool things in AI. So
Yeah,
definitely should check that out.
Yeah, I got a notification on LinkedIn that Henk was live, so I just checked it. And your live shows are very creative, like not just another live shows. I really love tuning in to your events. Henk, I know I am already a couple of minutes in your session. I see you're sharing your slides. Once you move away the stream, so I'll add it to the stream. Yeah, I've added it to the stream now. Everybody can see it. And next 25 minutes is all yours.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone, and welcome to my session, What's New in Azure Machine Learning? So my name is Henk, and I'm a cloud advocate at Microsoft based in the Netherlands, and my job is to make you all successful on our cloud with Azure AI. So in this session, we are going to cover a few things. Azure Machine Learning is big. We only have 25 minutes, so I picked two new things I want to talk with you about. So first, for the people who don't know what Azure Machine Learning is, I'm going to explain very quickly what our offering consists of. So what is Azure Machine Learning? Then we're going to have a look at how we can use Visual Studio Code and the Azure Command Line Interface, Azure CLI, to control Azure Machine Learning. And then finally, we're going to dive in online managed endpoints. So machine learning on Azure. That is a lot, like as you can see here. So if we start at the top, that are our cognitive services. So if you want to use artificial intelligence, use computer vision, use speech in your applications, and you don't want to do the AI, you can call one of our endpoints, and we will do it for you. Then you can use any tool like Jupyter Notebook, Visual Studio Code, the command line to train your own models. We support all the popular frameworks, so you can train PyTorch, TensorFlow, Scikit-learn, Onyx models, all on our cloud. And we have some services for you to make things easier, like Azure Databricks, Azure Machine Learning, and Machine Learning Virtual Machines. And we are going to talk very specifically how Azure Machine Learning can make your life a little bit easier. And finally, we have a lot of infrastructure to make your training go fast, and we can run things securely in the cloud for you. So what is Azure Machine Learning? So Azure Machine Learning is a cloud service that helps you manage the life cycle of your machine learning model. So from the data all the way up to running your models in production and getting feedback from those models. So Azure Machine Learning covers the whole day-to-day workflow, including MLOps. So what is it exactly? So it is a set of cloud services combined. It is not just one thing. It is Azure Machine Learning, it is storage, it is a key vault, it is a container registry, it's our containers. So it is a bunch of cloud services together that you can control with a Python SDK and through the Azure CLI. And today we're going to talk about how we can do that using the Azure CLI. And that set of cloud services with that tooling enables us to prepare data, train our models, track our experiments, and finally deploy our models. So Visual Studio Code and the command line interface. What does that have to do with machine learning? So I will tell you that. So the Azure Machine Learning of the Azure CLI has an extension for machine learning. And with that extension, we can control the Azure Machine Learning service. So we can run commands in the using a CLI command that will kick off a training, will create a data set for us, will manage and update an endpoint, can register models. Basically everything you can do in the Azure portal, you can also do in the CLI with the ML extension. Visual Studio Code is using that extension to execute commands. So Visual Studio Code also has an extension for Azure Machine Learning. And with that extension, if you have that installed, you can connect to your workspace and get a visual representation of what is in your workspace. So you can see what type of data sets you have. You can go to your experiments, can go to your endpoints. And the cool thing is that from here, you can create configuration files that can be run using the Azure CLI. So you don't have to type the whole command. You can just create the configuration file, give it to the CLI, and run it. So how does it work? So here we have this slide. So you have your workspace, Azure Machine Learning workspace in the cloud. That is the big icon in the bottom. And Visual Studio Code understands and knows your workspace. So you see all the things. And with that knowledge, it can generate YAML files, YAML configuration files. And with those YAML configuration files, you can use the CLI to create new resources in your workspace, like kick off a training run, deploy a model, register a model, create a new data set. And when that runs, you can see that back again in Visual Studio Code. So, small recap about what we're going to do. We're going to use Visual Studio Code to show elements in your machine learning workspace. Visual Studio Code can generate configuration files for you. And Visual Studio Code uses the Azure CLI to execute these configuration files for you. And that is all very handy to separate configuration from your code that will do the actual training. So now it is time for a demo, and we're going to actually dive into the code and see how that works. So let's dive into Visual Studio Code. So here is my directory, just a directory on my local hard disk checked in to a GitHub repository where you have configuration files. And here is the Azure Machine Learning extension that can browse through my workspace. So I've already created a workspace. My workspace is called Cybertron. I have different data sets here. I have a Lego data set, version 1 and version 2. Here I have a bunch of models. It connects now to my Azure Machine Learning workspace, and we'll get all my models. I have a lot registered, so it will generate a list soon. Here we have my endpoints, and here under we have the different types of compute that are available. So let's dive into some of these configuration files, what you can do. So I'll go back to my files, and here I have create my workspace YAML file. I will tell the name, tell which location it has to be deployed, give the friendly name, can give it some tags, and I can right click on it and run. I will not do that now because we don't need a new workspace, but we can see if we can create a data set. So the data is all in here, training data, and we're going to create version 3 of it. You have to save it first. Thank you for that. And then it will, of course, first see if there is a connection to the data set, which probably is not, otherwise it would have had this connection. So what I will do is I will restart Visual Studio Code, and we will try it again. Extension is loading, checking to see if we have access to the machine learning workspace. Yes, we have access. And it should start executing the command. So here you see it is running the Azure Machine Learning or the Azure CLI command with the configuration file and as context about my subscription, resource group. So Visual Studio Code generates that Azure CLI command for me, which is very handy. So if we now go back to our Azure Machine Learning workspace, Cybertron, go to the data set, we see that it has created a new version of the data here. So this is all pretty handy and useful. But how about training a job now? So here we have a YAML file that will help me train a model. So we call it, we will log everything under the Simpsons demo experiment. You can find my training scripts in the scripts folder, in the train folder. If we have a look in that folder, here we have a Python file that actually does the training for me. So this is an example I copied from the PyTorch website, and I've added a few things. I added some references to the Azure ML Python libraries, parsing some incoming arguments, and at the bottom of the script, I am uploading the models, the generated models, the created models to my experiment, tag it, and then register a model. So let's say here, Azure Cloud, typing is hard, Cloud Summit, and kick off a training round because that takes a while. So it has the training scripts, and this is the command that it will execute when the training script is uploaded to the cloud. So it has train.py, it has data. I'll get back later where the data is coming from, the number of training rounds, and the model name. And this command will run in an environment. So there are two types of environments. There are environments you can create yourself, bring your own Docker container, or you can pick one of the environments that are managed by us. So I'm picking an Azure ML curated environment having PyTorch 1.7 installed on Ubuntu 18 with CUDA drivers and a GPU that is GPU enabled, and I'm picking version 3 of that container. This container is going to run on my compute cluster, Optimus Prime, which you can create also with through a YAML file. And it's going to use my input data. And this is actually pretty cool because Azure Machine Learning is or Visual Studio Code is connected to my Azure Machine Learning, it will actually autocomplete my datasets. So we are using version 3 or version 2, version 3. So this makes creating these configuration files really easy. And here we see already the output from my job that is being training in the cloud. So it is sending all the outputs back from my training script. So this will take a little while, and then eventually my model should be completed, and we should be able to see that in Azure Machine Learning itself. Hey, here we see script run 5 in experimentation demo. It is finalizing. It is actually created now with our scripts here, and it should deliver us a model which we can find back under models with our correct tag, Conference Azure Cloud Summit. Still have to learn how to spell, but it is actually here. So here is our model. And using the CLI or the Python SDK, both have like the really big advantage that you can see how your model is being created. So this model is being created by this run. In this run, we can see which command was executed and, very important, which data set was used. So if we click here, we see the data set, we see how many files are in the data set and what the total size is. Here is this registered as the Lego data set. We have version 2 is being used. We created version 3, and we can actually explore this data set and see the images. Takes a while, but if we are patient, we will see Bart Simpson here. So these are the training images, and there are 500 of it. And that's all with some configuration files. So YAML is there for configuration, and then the Python file or wherever you want to train your model in is separated from this configuration. So now that we have a model, we probably want to deploy that model. At the moment, we can deploy models in an Azure Container Instance, in a linked Azure Kubernetes service, but now in preview is online managed endpoint. And this is a really, really cool offering because it is, like the title already tells you, it is completely managed for you. You don't have to do anything. You get automatic scaling. You can manage traffic to your different deployments. So how does it work? You create an endpoint, and in that endpoint, you can do all types of different deployments. So let's say I have model 1 and model 2. So I deploy model 1 first, route 90% of the traffic to that, and I make it run on cheap compute. It doesn't really perform, so I think let's train another model with another framework or with some different parameters, and let's run that on a GPU-enabled machine and put 10% of the traffic there. Then I add some logging, and I can really see the differences between those types of deployments. And if my deployment from model 2 is better, then I can route all the traffic to that by using the CLI or by just using the visual interface in the ml.azure.com portal. So let's see how that works. I think I've still a few minutes to show you that. Okay, so into deployment. So for the deployment, we can also use curated environments, or we can create an environment that is just very specifically for my trained model. Here, I'm creating a deployment environment called Simpson Scoring version 2, based on this, created from this Docker base image. And then I'm asking it to use this conda file to install some extra tooling for me. And that's here. So install Python 3.6, Azure ML, please, PyTorch, and Pillow. That's it. Don't install anything more, just install that. Then I can start creating an endpoint. And when you create an endpoint, you also specify your first deployment in it. So this endpoint is called Simpsons Demo. It is an online endpoint. And I'm saying just add some authentication for me. So this, I don't have to handle in my code. This managed endpoint handles authentication for me. Scale all the traffic to the first, to 100% of the traffic to the deployment called V0, V01. And here is the deployment. Enable application insights for me, out of the box, application insights, so you can track your performance of your container. And then use upload all the code that is in scripts score and use this scoring script because it will run into in a server, and it needs like a little bit of code where you tell what it should do to load your model and how to run data through your model to get a prediction. So this is an init method, and this loads your model. And then there is this run method, and that will parse the incoming JSON, downloads the image, does pre-processing over the image so that it is in the right tensor, and then it will run it through the model, and it will return the prediction as a JSON to us. So that is that. So score.py. Run this in the Azure Machine Learning Simpsons v4 version 2 environment. So this is an environment I have created. Use some compute, use the standard F4S v2 virtual machines. You can say also the standard NC6 machines if you want to have a GPU. And then you can define how you want this deployment to scale for you. Do you want to have it manually, like me? Or do you want to have it automatically and say max 10 instances? The minimum is 1, and now spin up 5, please. So you can say those kind of things here. So then you have one deployment up and running, and you can add another deployment. So this was version 1 of the model, and now we're going to add version 2 of the model. Same thing, application insight, same instance type, same scaling, but just a different type of the model, of a different version of the model. Version 1 I trained only for 2 rounds, and the other one I trained for 12 rounds. So this should be a very distinct in the outcome. If I send one image to one endpoint and the other image to another endpoint, there should be some difference visible in that. And then I can say Azure ML update the endpoint with Simpsons 5 and scale the traffic 50-50. So this I've done. It takes around 10 minutes for the deployment to be done at the moment. So we're not going to wait for that. So here we're going to look at the deployed endpoint, and we will see Simpsons demo here. We have 2 deployments, version 1 and version 2, with 50% of the traffic. Here we see which model is actually running in there, environments, and here we see version 2 is running in there. We can have a look at the deployment logs for if anything goes wrong. Can go to the metrics and to the deployment back. Here is how we can actually consume it. So there's a URL. There are some keys here, some sample code. So let's see what happens if we send an image from what we're sending to Homer Simpson to that endpoint. No, that's not what I wanted to click on. I wanted to click here, send request. So we've sent a request, and we see that we hit Azure ML model deployment version 2, and the score is 95% for Homer Simpson. Now we've sent it to version 1, and it is 85. So if we keep doing that, we will see that it's all different requests that will swap between endpoint 1 and 2. So that, in very short, are 2 things I wanted to talk to you about what is new with Azure Machine Learning. So if you want to check out my demo code, you can go to ak.ms, AML, Azure Machine Learning, demo VS Code. Or if you want to read more documentation and see more examples than my quick 20 minutes about the technology, you can go to ak.ms/aml VS Code or ak.ms/AML/OMA online managed endpoints and learn more on Microsoft Docs. So back to you, Simon.
Absolutely great, Henk. I think you just covered an end-to-end solution in just about 25 minutes. Here's my very quick question. I remember the last time I hosted you, you did everything inside the Azure Machine Learning, right? And you didn't write even a single line of code. Whereas today, you ended up writing a lot of code. So here's my quick question: Can I, if I don't know YAML and all that stuff, right? So whatever you did today, can I do exactly that on Azure Machine Learning Studio and all Designer?
Yeah, so that is also the Azure Machine Learning Visual Designer. And there you can drag and drop some basic steps. You can still write code in the Visual Designer because sometimes you just need to bring your own code. But yeah, this is especially handy, these configuration files, if you want to bring things in production. So everything you do is documented in this case, YAML files. And also Azure DevOps or GitHub Actions can run Azure CLI, Azure CLI comments for you. So it can create those jobs, it can do those deployments automatically for you, and you can test it locally on your machine. And your data scientist team can work on the Python file that will actually train the model separately from how it is going to run in the cloud.
Having said that, Henk, as we started from the very beginning, right? Azure Machine Learning and AI and machine learning is a very big ecosystem, right? There's so many products out there. Now, as I said, you are also a cloud advocate and you work very closely with the engineering team and with the customers, right? Out of all these products, which are a couple of products that customers really use a lot? I would like to know that.
Yeah. Yeah, so what I see is that Azure Machine Learning Service, this service is really starting to be used in big environments to actually start working together on creating AI solutions. And this is also the product I focus on.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's great. That's absolutely amazing. Henk, before we move to the next session, I know you manage the global AI community. Shameless plug-in, anything you want to plug about the upcoming events and all that. I saw you did share welcome back global AI community sometime. Just go ahead and plug something.
Oh, yeah, perfect. Thank you for that. Yes, so 2 things are going to happen in October from the global AI community. We will have another global AI student conference, around 8 hours of content from student ambassadors and people in the field. So that is really good. And there is going to be the global AI back together. It has been quiet for a while from the back together. And we're going to try and see if we can do 3 evenings in October, a workshop with each other and get back together to learn all about AI again. And some countries will be lucky enough that it can be in person. Some countries are going to do it virtual. Some people just love the whole virtual thing and are just going to continue being virtual. So it is up to every user group all over the world on how they want to participate and deliver the session.
Yeah, I saw it for India. It was Pune, but unfortunately it was online. I just wish things get better here in India so that we can take things offline. I also saw one for Indonesia and in the Latin America and also in the Europe. So you already know I have checked that website. So thank you so much, Henk. I really appreciate, absolutely loved hosting you. I don't want to wait another like a year to host you. I don't want to do that. So I'll keep on pinging you. Until then, all the best for all your live shows and events that you do. And yeah, we'll stay connected. Have a nice day ahead.
Yes, thank you. Good luck.
Bye. All right, with that session on what's new with Azure Machine Learning, you learned so much. We now move to our next session that is around to get certified. I mean, it is so important to get certified. And there's so many things that you're going to learn. And I believe this session was one of the featured sessions for Microsoft Build. Wow. So if you couldn't attend Microsoft Build, here's one Tiago joining us. I don't know from where he's joining, so I'll just ask him. Yeah, let's welcome our next speaker, Tiago. Hi, Tiago. Welcome to Cloud Summit 2021.
Hi, Simon. Welcome. That was a great video, by the way. I still need to figure it out, the last picture from where it was, because I don't even remember that.
Oh, I don't even know that. We had to literally scrap your social media. But Tiago, I have a small team who helps me out. But Tiago, I'm really looking forward for your session that is about all about Azure Professional Certification, because I know not many people talk about this session, and people really want to get certified, even may it be a very fundamental certification. So I see us sharing your screen. I have added it to the stream. So next 25 minutes is all yours.
Okay, thank you very much. So yes, so this session is about exactly that, all that you need to know in order to get Azure certified. So my name is Tiago, and by the way, that's a picture of my hometown. I'm from Lisbon, Portugal, and you have all my information here. So you have my Twitter handler, Tiago Costa PT. I usually share tons of stuff on Twitter, so if you want to follow me, please do. I share stuff around Azure and also about Azure certifications. Then I'm an MVP for Azure, regional lead. I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer, and I help Microsoft. So I'm one of the members of the Certification Council member. We are a very small team, and I'm not a Microsoft employee, but I help them with some information and some feedback about the certification program. What will be our agenda for today? So we're going to talk about very quickly, what is Azure today? How important is Azure in the world today? Then we're going to talk about how Microsoft builds a certification program. Then we're going to focus on the certifications on Azure. What certifications are out there? What can or what should you want to achieve in terms of Azure certifications? And then I have a small step, which is 4 steps to get certified. So some old small tips that that I have around how to get certified. So there you go. So what is Azure today? So Azure today is the second largest cloud provider. Look, I'm not going to give you the sales speech on this. Tons of regions, tons of fiber, okay? Tons and tons and tons of edge sites. So Azure usually, sometimes it's even closer to you than what you think, because it's not only the main regions, you also have edge sites for services like CDN and things like that maybe they're even in your hometown. Okay, so this is what we have. And then why should you care around Azure today? Well, for sure you care because you're attending this, but there is huge demand from customers. It's like nothing that I have seen before in all my career, and I already have a few years working with Microsoft technologies. There is, but so much need for people that are capable of working with Azure. And what better way to show that you're capable with the Microsoft certification? You might not have, years and years of experience, but I will care for you because, you care to take a certification. You care to learn. And that's very, very important for me, at least when I need to hire people for my projects and things like that. And then, of course, look, it's fun to work with. I have to say, I'm very passionate about what I do, but I'm also very lucky because I really do what I love. So until now, for example, I'm designing here an architecture for a customer. And I'm having fun, to be honest. I hope that my customer is not watching this, okay? But and they pay me, which is also nice, okay? And to pay for what you use, and that's a model for the customer that is pretty cool because, well, you don't want to pay for services that you're not using, or you don't want to pay for having, I don't know, let's give a number, 20 servers when you only need 2, but you have to have 20, because when you have a peak on the demand, yeah, you need a 20. That's the on-prem world. In the cloud world, we don't have that. We're just going to have 2. That's what we need now. And then when we need the 20, or even when we need 30, 40, 50 servers, we will be able to have them. Of course, you need to pay them, but we only pay for what you use, and that's the perfect approach for all of this. So let's talk about the certifications, okay? So today, basically, we live in a world that is a connected world, And we have all these dots and everyone is connected. And this is not only for our lives, it's also when we do projects, like we have a customer, we need to migrate that customer totally to Azure. Well, that's a big challenge for customers in a certain dimension. I'm a solution architect, and I basically lead those efforts, but I'm not a very, very deep dive person in networking, for example. So I need to interact and bring people from the networking world. Same thing for databases. I'm not like the best person in terms of database. I have a huge background in that, but I didn't work with it for the last years. So let's grab someone from that field. Might have a Java application. I'm not the best person for that, for sure. So let's bring someone from that world. So all these connected dots, when we have projects, we today, and we all know this more and more because of the pandemic that we live, we can have teams that are totally dispersed around the world. And that's great because I can now get the top of the top and getting someone very specific to work in a role that is just networking or just databases, and I will get the best persons to do the job. And with this, okay, we get why Microsoft created, and they changed like 2-3 years ago from a product-based certification, like you were Windows Server 2016 certified, and was like that version. Oh, but we're working with 2019, you're not certified on that. Yeah, but I'm certified on the previous version. And that was the world that we lived. Right now, no, you live in a role world. And this role base is based on your roles that you want to achieve or that you already do. If you're a networking engineer, that's what you want to do. Azure networking, there is a certification for that. Azure administrator or solutions architect. Okay, so that's what we have. And with this, we talk about how Microsoft builds certifications. I think this is important for you to understand certifications a little bit better. There is basically a work being done in the backstage that is called a GTA, okay? So it's called a job task analysis. That GTA, Microsoft, basically what it does, it identifies, okay, the roles that are in the market. And they very early, they said, well, we have an Azure administrator, we have an Azure developer, and we have an Azure solution architect. Those are like the 3 first roles that, they came up with. With that done, it's done by subject matter experts. They sit down and they say, what does an Azure administrator, let's give the Azure administrator as an example for our session today. What does an Azure administrator needs to do, what he needs to know? And then they do a list of all the things that an Azure administrator needs to do. And it's with that document that we call, by the way, an objective domain that we are going, okay, to create. This is what comes out on the exam. This is all the topics on the exam. It's based on that document that Microsoft also creates the Microsoft Learn content, because they need to create Learn content for that. It's where they have official courses. It's where other companies like LinkedIn Learning, Pluralsight, and all the other companies from the world, they grab that document and they start to produce content around that, because that's what you need to know. And of course, there are exam questions also created based on that. So this aligned learning experiences is something amazing that we have today. So nowadays, what we have is that we have digital skilling like Microsoft Learn, which is free. You don't pay for it. You just go to Learn and look, just search for all the content that you have there. And you have amazing content that is pretty good, to be totally honest. You can go to events remotely like this, virtually like this event, for example, that has tons of amazing sessions. I was seeing the last 2 sessions, for example, and they're pretty good, to be honest. We learn a lot. Even people that are super experienced, there's always something, to be totally honest, that we don't work on a daily basis, and we are, oh, that's interesting. You can also attend classroom training, so the traditional classroom training taught by Microsoft certified trainers. it's a model. Okay, I'm very into that, to be totally honest. I really love to teach. I also teach people. It's one of the things that I do too. And I really love the classroom. I also have videos, okay? So you can also grab videos from LinkedIn Learning or from Plural site. There is like tons of stuff there. The thing is, not everyone learns the same way. So if you prefer videos, great for you. If you prefer attend an event, also great for you. There are people that they prefer classroom training. Same thing, okay? Or you can do a mix, okay? Just a piece of this and a piece of the other one, and I'm sure you will ace it. So what we have on the Microsoft certifications. So we have 3, let's just say, call it levels. It's the fundamentals, the role-based. The role-based are the ones that incorporate the associate and the expert levels, and we're going to understand what they are. And we also have the speciality, which is a very focused on very, very specific roles, okay? So like, for example, Azure for SAP workloads. You have a SAP workload. Hey, great. We need to run that on Azure. And look, that's specific for the SAP world. So it didn't make sense to create an associate certification for that. Definitely not an expert one. So they created this other level, which is the speciality. Fundamentals are what? So I tell everyone, start with the fundamentals. Hey, Tiago, but look, I'm already experienced with Azure. Do you have a Microsoft certification or at least a roles-based certification? And if the answer is, oh, no, it's going to be my first one, start with the fundamentals. It might be an easy certification for you. I'm not going to lie. Sure, it is going to be. But you'll learn how questions are formulated. You'll learn how the exam structures are. And all of that, that is going to be super valuable when you take the associate or the expert exam. So that's a great way. The role-based, what we have. So we have the associate and the expert levels. And there is one thing that I always love to say is that you're not only going to be tested through questions, but you also need to know how to do things, especially on the associate level. Not so much on the expert, but also on the expert. But on the associate, usually the exams are, they give you a question, like a small scenario there, and now you have to say how you do something. And some of the questions are even with live, okay, an Azure portal, and you really need to do things. It's not just, okay, doing, just answering questions. You know, you really need to log into the Azure portal and do something on the Azure portal. And this is how you should test people nowadays, to be honest. This is how you really know if someone knows something or not, is by asking them to do it, okay? So this is what we have in terms of the certifications. And if we turn the laser on here, so we have this expert level that we have, and we have the associate level. On the associate level, look, we have the Azure administrator and the Azure developer. I think they are pretty straightforward what they are, right? Creating virtual machines, creating things and resources on Azure, managing the resources on Azure. Developer is, yeah, let's develop, okay, applications, and mainly you're being tested on the exam in C# or Python. You can select one or the other. And it's, let's code applications using Azure services. No one is going to test you on how to code. You're not going to be tested on that for sure. It's more on how do you use Azure services. Like, let's give an example, Azure Storage. How do you access an Azure Storage account through the SDK? And how do you store data there, like a PDF file? Things like this. Then we have the security engineer. Okay, so the security engineer, it's a very entry-level certification around Azure security as a whole. Azure AD, we talk about basically about the Azure services like SQL databases. How do you protect that? Containers, how do you protect containers? Virtual machines, of course, how do you protect that? So it's pretty cool what you can do with this. Then we have the network engineer. That's a new one, by the way. Okay, that's a very recent one. The exam, it is still in beta. It's the AZ700. And as the name says, it's just the networking component. There's a little bit of overlapping between the network engineer and the networking part of the Azure administrator. So if you already took the Azure administrator with a little bit more effort, you take the networking engineer, I'm sure you will pass. And then look, we have the expert level. That in the expert level, we have 2 certifications, which is the solutions architect, which is architecting, designing applications to Azure or native cloud applications on Azure. And then we have the DevOps. Okay, so the DevOps engineer, it's a certification that's a very special one because it's the only one that has a prereq currently that you need to be certified with the administrator or the developer, but I'll talk about that later. So there's a prereq, and then this is not just DevOps on Azure, but it has tons of things that you need to know. So it's not just the Azure part, but it's more the Azure DevOps project with repos, with pipelines. Okay, so all of that part. And then we have here the specialty. Okay, so we currently have 3 specialties: Sept workloads, IoT developer, Azure virtual desktops. There are the 3 current ones. And I'm sure, look, what you see here, if we had the same talk, I don't know, 3-4 months from now, yeah, this will be different. Okay, definitely. No questions on that. So let's talk about specifically on this. So this is another way that I have to show basically the certifications, where you can see here that this DevOps engineer, you have this prereq here. But all the other ones, there is no prereq. Even the fundamentals is not a prereq. This is why it is clearly saying they're optional. I recommend you to take it for sure, but it's not something that you need, okay, that you need to do. And then look, I have here like learning pots. So this is like the learning pot for the Azure fundamentals. And there's like 4 topics in here. And then we talk about, this is the exam, the AZ900. But now, how do you know this? Okay, there's always that big question that people have, is that, oh, Tiago, how do I know that? Okay, let's just drag here, okay, this. And what is the exam? It's the AZ900, right? So you just search AZ900, and you go to this page, exam AZ900, the title of the exam. And let me just put this a little bit bigger so that everyone can see this quite well. And if you scroll down, you have this area, skills measured. And there is a link here that says download something, which is the exam skills measured. And this is a PDF file. You look at this PDF file, and look, it has here all the things that you're going to be tested, like literally everything. Because when I showed you, right, just this, and you say there cloud concepts, it's this part that says here, describe cloud concepts. But then, as you can see, there is like literally tons of small bullet points in this. So you really need to know, okay, what it is. This is an easy certification. It's not that complex, to be totally honest with you. But this is what we have here. Then we have, this is the administrator one. So we talk about Azure subscription, storage solutions, virtual machines, networking, and identity. If we want to see some of the key points on this one, okay, yeah, definitely Azure AD is a big topic, creating users, groups, devices, multi-factor authentication, and a little bit of Azure AD Connect. Even though Azure AD Connect, we don't clearly talk that much on the exam on this, but you need to understand. Then we talk about governance. We talk about cost management, okay, tags, role-based access control, policies. And if topics like this, I'm saying this, and you're like, oh, I'm not getting what Tiago is saying, well, just study first before you take the exam. It's my advice, okay? Other stuff, it's around storage, like storage accounts, the import-export service, data box, files, backup. And I just have this here as key points. And, you know, there is tons of stuff that you need to know, okay? So this is why, okay, let me just grab here We also have the developer that you need to take the AZ204. That's just one exam, and you get certified. And again, tons of topics here. Just search for this, okay, on that part. Then we also have the solutions architect. So the solutions architect's a little bit different. As you see, there's like 2 blue boxes here. Yes, there are 2 exams. So there's one exam, which is a 303, and there's a second exam, which is the 304. The 303, it's a very do-it exam. So it's a very hands-on exam, how to do things. And there is a big overlap with the AZ104, which is the Azure Administrator. So if you already know the Azure Administrator topics, maybe even already are certified on that, taking the 303 should be more accessible for you. But it's still a big exam. There is still some things in here that you don't have on the AZ104. Okay, so reach out for the exam objective PDF, check out that, compare, read it, see the stuff that you're already good on it, move on, read the other stuff, because there's always things that you don't know because you don't work with them all the time, which is perfectly valid, perfectly fine. And then there's the second exam, 304. So the 304, it's a design exam. So it's, as the name says, it's not how to do things, it's how should I design things. So it's more like you have got questions like, oh, we have this scenario, what services should you put here, or should you use private endpoint for this, or a VNet integration, things like that. Okay, so it's more conceptual than let's do it. How do you get certified? You have to have both exams. A question that comes up all the time, oh, do I need to do 303 first and then 304? No, it doesn't matter, okay? Just do it the first that you want, and then do the other one, and when you have the 2, you get certified. A normal path for me, yeah, just follow the numbers, okay? 303 first, 304 after. That will be my choice, and that's my recommendation. And with this, we get to the DevOps. So the DevOps path, as you can see, yeah, tons of content here. Same thing, check the PDF for all the details. And we have this AZ400. But a great thing here, an important part of this, is that there is a prereq. You need to be certified on the Azure Administrator or Azure Developer. Okay, so you need to have that certification and take the AZ400, you get certified. Again, like the same thing, loads of people, sometimes they take AZ400, they don't get the certification, they kind of complain. Then I tell them, oh, are you an administrator or a developer? Oh, no, you need to have it. So you can take this exam first and then one of the others first. Again, doesn't make sense, but you can do it if you wish. And a question that sometimes comes up here is, okay, do I need to take AZ104? Or, Tiago, I took the Azure Administrator, but in a previous version of the exam, like AZ103. Yeah, doesn't matter. It's the certification, not the exam, not how you got it. It's the certification that is the prereq. Got it? So it doesn't matter if you had a previous generation certification, as long as it's the Azure Administrator Associate, you're good to go, okay? There is no problem whatsoever there. So with this, and we have 3 minutes, 2 minutes, how do you prepare for a certification? That's usually loads of people that question me around this. So I have like a method that is the 4 steps to get Azure certified, which is pretty simple. Is read the exam objectives, you know, that file that I showed you. Get training resources, practice, and then take the exam. So let's talk about the exam objectives. We already saw it. So this is the 104. Check this, read all the details of this, and then find information around this. Get training resources. That's usually what I say. In my website, tiagocosta.com, Azure certifications, you have basically study guides for each one of the exams. I'm still building for the AZ700 and the latest ones, but just go there, and you have like links for Microsoft Learn content around this. There's the Microsoft official courses. There's Microsoft Docs with tons of documentation around the services. There's practice tests. I just put their measure up because it's the official one. There are other providers out there that have amazing practice tests. And then you have LinkedIn, plural site content. And again, look, other providers, okay, out there with amazing content. I really didn't want it to put more over there because I will always going to miss one of them. And there's always people that get mad with me because, oh, we forgot about this one. Yeah, sure. And there's even some that I even don't know, okay? Step 3, practice, okay? Go to the Azure portal, fire up Visual Studio Code, create PowerShell, Azure CLI command. Look, do things, okay? That's how you learn. Sometimes you got a practice question. How do you do this? And you don't know. Yeah, just go to the Azure portal and try doing it. You will learn, and now you know the answer. Oh, that's the answer. You answer that. You will never forget about that anymore because now you know how to do. And then, 4th step, an important one, take the exam. I'm even going to tell you a secret. Before you start step 1, start step 1 and schedule the exam right away for a further date. Now you have a commitment. That day, you're going to take the exam. You can always postpone it, okay, if you wish. But at least you have like a personal goal. That day, take the exam. Don't be afraid to take the exam, okay? Some people are, oh, I'm afraid of failing. If you fail, what's the problem? Take the exam again. Okay, there is a fee that you need to pay. That's the only bad part of the story. Because look, I'm not going to lie. Everyone that is certified and they have like years of certifications in somewhere in their story, they have failed on an exam. I have failed on an exam. No problem in saying that. Okay, just go for it. I'm sure that sometimes you know more than you feel that you know. When you get to the exam, there's people that pass on the exam with a good score, and they were a little bit afraid of taking the exam. Okay, so just go for that. Okay, and that's it. Okay, so thank you very much. I think we are on time. My name is Tiago, and this is how you get Azure certified.
That was absolutely great, Tiago. I can bet that whosoever has watched past 25-minute session, right, they have a very good idea about Azure certifications, what is Azure, the importance, how you can go ahead and schedule it, some of the best practices you shared. We do have some questions. Let's go ahead and take it. There's always questions around certification, isn't it? So here's the first one you did cover in your session. Feliz says, I'm a student doing an undergraduate, doing a major in applied technology. What certification can better prepare me for careers in the cloud?
Yeah. So I will definitely first of all try the fundamentals. Okay, they are the more accessible ones to enter into the technology, and then try to go to one of the associates. And I'm not going to tell you, oh, this is the one that you should take, because it depends on what is the path that you want to go. If you want a path more on the developer world, yeah, take the Azure developer. If you prefer to have a career more on building solutions and things like that, like virtual machines, containers, go for the Azure administrator, okay? So it kind of depends. But the fundamentals is the same for everyone. And it's a great way to enter in all this world.
Yeah, I remember doing the fundamentals back in 2014, and I still like to go back and do it because it just refreshes our basics. And I like to go ahead and do it. So
I took all the fundamentals that exists, even in areas that it's not my area, just to know a little bit. You know, like for example, I took one on a Power Platform. I don't do Power Platform stuff, to be honest with you, but I love doing it because I learn stuff, and that's the important part.
And I think I should do one Power Platform too. I did one for AI, but I think I should do one for Power Platform too. Let's take another question. That's for Sriram. He's asking, Tiago, may I know if there's any certification for Azure Kubernetes?
No, there is not. That's a valid point. and I already took that to Microsoft because I think,
Really?
not Kubernetes specific. I will go a little bit more broad, but containers in general. But no, there's nothing. There is some Kubernetes certifications, but that's not Azure Kubernetes or AKS. Okay. So I think I lost Simon's voice, but I think I can read the question.
No. You didn't lose my voice. I was just checking if you can read my lips, but you failed. But
that's a great save, by the way.
So-
But this one, I can read the question. Many years before Azure certification becomes obsolete. So that's a very good question, John. I understand your question. The technical name is not obsolete. Okay. It's how many years it's valid. Okay, so currently, if you take a certification today, it's valid for 1 year. Okay, every year you need to recertify, but the recertification is free, and it's just a thing that you have to do it online. You don't need to go to a testing center. There is no formal validation. It is just like the differences on the last year. And I renewed my certifications, and look, I took like 20 minutes, 30 minutes to renew each one of them. It's a pretty easy process. And you have, I think it's like 6 months to do that. So there's like more than time enough. It is free. You can take one shot. If you fail, you can take a second shot right away. If you still fail, you can take one shot every 24 hours, I think. So to be totally honest, it's pretty straightforward, okay, to do that. You might see some people saying 2 years, by the way, okay, because it used to be 2 years, okay, but currently is 1 year.
All right, so we are running a little late for the next session, so let's quickly take a couple of more questions. The next one is from Akshita. Akshita is asking, is there a way to get a voucher for taking exam? I know there's one way.
Yeah, so there is a way. There is virtual training days. Search for that on the web. Okay.
Yeah.
So
go ahead and attend it.
Virtual training days, and then try to find. And usually there's like some training days from Microsoft, and then if you attend, then there's like some things that you need to do. You get a voucher.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. That's the answer I was going to give. Any certification for testing areas, Tiago?
No, the most near one is the DevOps one, which is not that similar to that. Thank you, Dimi.
Dimi says, awesome session. The next one, Tiago, what options do we have for database and Cosmos database? There's a lot many, right? I'm not sure about Cosmos.
So for databases, you have the DP300, which is the I don't know, I don't recall the name of the. I think it's data engineering something. And you have for Cosmos DB, there is no certification aligned directly with Cosmos DB, but that will be a great idea to have. Okay, really good idea to have something like that. Okay,
Mark Brown, if you're listening, people want Cosmos DB certification.
Yeah, let's get one of those.
Yeah, I think we're all done. People say thank you. So thank you for joining in. Sebastian asked if there's recertify. You did tell about it. So I think we're all good with the questions. Tiago, any final thing you want to plug in before we move to the next session?
If you want to take a certification, just go for it. To be totally honest, don't be afraid. There's some people that they say, I'm not capable, I'm not, I don't have experience. Just start studying. Go for it. You can do it. That's what I have to say. Everyone can do it. If you can, look, everyone is smart enough to study. You just need to put an effort and take the certification.
Yeah. And sometimes you fail. I recently failed the AI engineer exam. So I don't mind confessing that.
Look, and it's not a shame to say.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So thank you so much, Tiago. It was absolutely amazing session. I love your background. If we can barter with your pillow and what I'm gonna send you, that would be great.
It's a real background, by the way. And I have 2 pillows of those. Okay. Okay,
really,
bye-bye.
you can exchange. All right, thank you, Tiago. Have a nice day. Bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right, with that, all you've learned about the Azure certification, we now move back to the SQL thing. I mean, we have so many sessions on SQL. Yeah, because people love SQL anyway. So for this session, we have Maurer. Maurer's going to talk about data replication in Azure SQL and beyond. And I'm really excited to host her once again. I believe I hosted her in the first quarter of this year, which was SQL Server Virtual Conference. And here's the best part about the summit that Maurer likes. That's her intro video. So let's play it. Hi, Maurer. Welcome to Cloud Summit 2021.
Hello. How are you?
I'm doing great, Maurer. Thank you so much once again for joining us on the live show. Quick question. How was your summer?
It was really good. I traveled a bit back home in Europe. I was in Romania for a long time. So really nice. How was your summer?
So Maurer, I know you have many Indian friends. So here in India, we don't do a lot of things in summer because it's very, very hot. We just stay inside. So I know that's not something very interesting that we do. But yeah. Yeah. All right. So Maurer, feel free to go ahead and share your screen. I know I'm already 6 minutes in your session. So we're going to do chit chat towards the end of your session. Yeah. So
sounds good.
Here we go.
Just a
second. I still don't see your screen. Yeah, I see it now. I'm going to add it to the stream. Maybe Maurer, you'd like to click on that hide, StreamYard hide. Right, that pop-up that says StreamYard. Yeah, this one. All right, Maurer, next 25 minutes is all yours.
Sounds good. So you can see my first slide, right? The blue one, because I have more screens.
I can.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today's session. I'm going to talk a bit more about data replication in Azure SQL and beyond. And what I mean to beyond is that we'll also explore some solutions available on SQL Server in Azure SQL databases and Azure SQL managed instance. So I'm a program manager in the Azure SQL department at Microsoft. Okay, so let's get started. So for today's agenda, we are going to very high levels and quickly discuss why is data replication relevant. And then we look at some common scenarios and solutions that we've seen our customers use for replication needs. And then we'll explore some of the solutions in more depth. Given the limited time, we'll only have time to explore 4 of these solutions, and we'll do 2 demos as well. So we look at change data capture, SQL Data Sync, change tracking, and transactional replication. And lastly, we are going to wrap it all up, bring it all together, and do a comparison of these replication technologies. So at very high level, why is data replication relevant? Well, there are so many scenarios for replication all over the world in so many industries. Like you might have a business that has offices and inventory in different regions of the world, and you want to make sure that all the bases in all these regions stay synchronized to the inventory. So you might use data replication technologies. You might be a 911 system that has to very quickly displace resources within a country, and you have to be aware of all the needs at all points in time. So you would need real-time or as close to real-time replication to be able to very quickly react to people's needs in different parts of the country. There might be a disaster in one of your regions, so you want to make sure that your database gets quickly shifted to another one to save all your data. So there are so many scenarios for replication, and we are going to explore some of them today. So as I was telling you, we've seen our customers use replication technologies for multiple scenarios. So you might want to synchronize your distributed applications or workloads that are globally distributed. And here you might want, for instance, for the distributed applications, you might store different workloads, so one production database and another analytics workload database, and you want to make sure those are synchronized. For such needs, you have several solutions like sync, change data capture, change tracking, transactional replication. We are going to explore all of them today. And then on the business continuity side, this refers to the procedures enabling you to continue operating in face of disruption. So if there is a data center outage, application upgrade, anything like that, there are some solutions. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go into this today. Then you might want to scale out your read-only workloads. So you want to offload read-only workloads instead of running them on the read-write replica for performance purposes. And lastly, you might just do data migrations from on-prem to Azure, and you might want to use some of our technologies. So just a quick heads up, this is in no way a comprehensive list. There are so many more replication technologies that we have both at Microsoft and third-party great tools out there. But today we are just going to focus on these ones. Okay. So let's get started. So we're gonna look more at change data capture. So change data capture helps you record data modification language changes. So as you can see in this diagram, you first enable change data capture at the level of the database that you want to track changes for. Once you enable it at the level of your database, you look at the source tables and you enable it at the level of each table that you want to track for changes. Once you do that, all the changes in your source tables that are tracked go to the transaction log, and from there are two jobs, a capture and a cleanup job. They are SQL Server agent jobs in Azure SQL Managed Instance and on the SQL Server version of CDC. We'll go into the Azure SQL Databases CDC soon. So these two jobs that are SQL Server agent jobs, the capture one takes changes from the transaction log and adds them to the change table. So for every source table you enable for CDC, you have an automatic change table being created for it, an associated CDC table. So all these changes are taken by the capture job from the transaction log and added to this associated CDC table. However, there's also a cleanup process, a cleanup job, which is also powered by the SQL Server agent, and that cleanup job cleans these change tables based on a time-based retention policy. And lastly, once you have all your changes in the CDC associated tables, you have query functions that you can use to consume the change data from the CDC change tables. And afterwards, you can stream these changes to other external destinations if you prefer, or you can keep them in the same database and run some analytic workloads on them. We'll look into more details soon. Okay. So I was telling you for CDC in Azure SQL Databases, which is currently in public preview as of this summer, we have a CDC scheduler that replaces the SQL Server agent, right? So the cleanup and capture jobs are being replaced by CDC scheduler, which automatically runs cleanup and capture on your database. So you can safely assume that they are being run on the background. However, if you still want to manually execute scan or cleanup, you can still use the same stored procedures on demand. So that's the main and only difference that you see for change data capture in Azure SQL databases relative to CDC in SQL Server or on Azure SQL Managed Instance. So here are some of the key CDC use cases. So you might want to track data changes for audit purposes. You might want to propagate changes to other downstream subscribers. You can do ETL operations to move the changes from your OLTP system to to data lake or data warehouse. And for this, if you want to downstream like changes, you might decide to use Azure Data Factory, for instance. You might also want to perform analytics on change data or do event-based programming to have like instantaneous responses based on data changes. And here you might have an application that does dynamic pricing. So that would be very, very helpful. Great. So bringing it all together for CDC, we have some key concepts that are worth understanding. And afterwards, we are going to go in a demo. So first of all, as I was telling you, we have the capture and the cleanup processes. The capture one scans the log for new change data, while the cleanup cleans the change tables based on a retention policy. However, you can also run this manually or by the scheduler if you're on Azure SQL databases. Then you have the change tables. So for every source table enabled for CDC, you have an associated change table created. Then you can do monitoring. So these are two DMVs that you can use to monitor CDC. Then you have table valued functions. So these allow you to take the changes over a specified range and to return that form in a filter result set. So you get all changes by default. You can also enable it such that you get net changes. And we'll see in the demo how you can do that. And lastly, we have log sequence numbers, which is really important. And this one identifies changes that were committed within the same transaction and orders those transactions. So that's on the transaction log side. CDC uses as LSN. Okay, great. So if you want to actually enable CDC on your Azure SQL databases, as I was mentioning, you first start at the database level. And once you enable this at the database level, you have 5 artifacts, which are these 5 system tables that get created on your same database. So it's very important to make sure before you start using CDC that you have enough space, given all these additional artifacts that CDC creates on your database. And also something to note for Azure SQL databases is that CDC won't work if your databases are in the S3 tiers, which is like standard 3 or below. So for instance, it won't work if you have a basic tier database. So once you enable CDC at the database level, you get these 5 system tables. So the first one, list of capture columns, list of tables that are enabled for capture, and the DDL history table. Then you can see the indexes associated with this change table. And lastly, you can see the mapping of LSN number and time. Once you do enable CDC at the database, you also enable it at the table level. This is what you would run to do that. And the moment you do that, your capture and cleanup get created, and there is a table to track changes on your source table. So if you do this on SQL Server or Azure SQL Managed Instance, you must ensure that your SQL Server agent is enabled for these 2 jobs to run. Great. So now let's do a demo for CDC on Azure SQL databases, which as of now is in public preview. Great. So here you can see I have a test database which only has 1 table and 1 customers table and 1 record in it. So I enable the database for change data capture, as you can see. And now I'm trying to show you that the system tables get created the moment you do that. So you have 5 additional tables in the system being created, which we just discussed about. So you can see the capture columns table, because you can select which columns to enable CDC for, and we're going to do that soon. The change tables, the DDL history for the DDL changes done in the past, index columns, and the LSN time mapping. Obviously, this will be mostly empty because we just started. So now let's see what we have in our customers source table, which we want to enable for CDC as well. It's just one very simple record. So I want to enable CDC at the level of this table. So I run this, and as you can see, you can also, here is where you decide if you want to support net changes. You automatically get all changes by default. And here you can select which columns to track. In my case, I want to track all columns. So once I do this, you can see that I have a new table, which is CDC DBO customers CT, which gets created for the associated source table that was enabled. And you can also see that I have the jobs showing up, the capture and cleanup jobs. There you can see where the table was created. And here you can see the default parameters for the jobs, which you can change, and we'll do that quite soon. So now I just want to insert a new customer on my source table and see if that gets identified by change data capture. And you can see it automatically. So the scheduler runs the scan automatically and takes the changes from the transaction log and adds them to the associated CDC table. However, you can still run manually the scan if you prefer to do so. So this still works. And here, as I was telling you, I want to change some of the parameters for CDC, some of the default ones. So let's say I want the retention policy to be changed. So I just did that. And as you can see, if you go back to the CDC jobs table, you can see that has been changed there. So based on your needs, you can alter these CDC parameters. So now, very simple. Now I just want to disable CDC on my table. So I want to see which table is enabled for CDC in case I would have more, let's say. So this is why I ran this command. And I can see that there is a parameter for CDC specifically. To find the table is tracked by CDC. So I found which table it is, and then I disable it at the table level and then at the database level. However, you can go ahead, disable CDC automatically from the database level, and that will be all good. You don't have to do both necessarily. So this is pretty much what I wanted to show you to get an idea of how CDC works on a very, very simple example on Azure SQL databases. Okay, so let's move onwards. So now we are going to look at SQL Data Sync, which is a different replication option, which actually allows both unidirectional but also bidirectional replication. So it allows you to synchronize data across Azure SQL and SQL Server on-prem or on your VM. And the whole concept of sync revolves around this idea of a sync group, which consists of a hub database and potentially one or more member databases. So the one requirement is that your hub database is always an Azure SQL database. However, your member DBs can be both either on Azure SQL DB or on SQL Server on-prem, for instance. So it doesn't really matter where your member DB is. However, hub has to always be on your Azure SQL DB. So there are some key concepts and properties for sync groups. So first you have the sync schema, which specifies what are the tables that will be synchronized within a database. Then you can choose the sync direction. So whether you want a one-way replication or bidirectional, so the sync can happen from member to hub, hub to member, or both. So what's very important is to recognize that sync has a hub and spoke model. So all the changes from the members get to the other members by first going through the hub. So that's how SQL Data Sync works. Then you can also configure the sync frequency. So here you might decide to do run sync manually on an on-demand basis, which is totally fine. However, you might also decide to do it automatically. So when you go in the Azure portal and configure your sync group, which we'll see in a second for a demo, you can say, I want sync to be triggered every 30 seconds or even every 30 days, which totally works. However, it's worth noticing that there is a latency for all these sync changes. Even though you set up the frequency is not the same as latency. The frequency is how often do I want my sync to be triggered. And lastly, I have a conflict resolving policy. So here are two options in sync, either member wins or hub wins, as you have data conflict changes. Great. So as you can see here, there is a sync local agent for SQL Server. So if you have members that are on-prem, you must use this. So basically, when SQL Data Sync service communicates with the agent, it does so using some encrypted connections and the unique agent key. So the SQL Server databases authenticate the agent using this connection string and agent key, and this design provides high level of security for your data. Great. One last thing that I wanted to mention about sync is that you have a private link as well, which is being used for the sync service to connect to your hub and member databases. And this offers a secure connection. However, you can only use sync private link if your member and hub databases are all hosted on Azure SQL and in the same cloud type. So basically all of them in the public cloud or all of them in the government cloud. Some common use cases that we've seen sync being used for are hybrid data synchronization, distributed applications, and globally distributed applications. And we also already discussed about these ones in the beginning. And now I'm going to do a demo for the globally distributed replication scenario with sync. So in this demo, we are a business that has inventory across two separate regions around the world, one in the US and another one in Asia. So what I want to do is to make sure that those two databases across these two regions are constantly in sync. And I will want to do bidirectional sync. So my US database is going to be the hub, and the Asia database will be member, and changes will be shifted from one to the other and back, because it's bidirectional. So let's see how that would work. So I have in the Azure portal, very simple. I'm just showing you what I have in the demo. In the hub database, I have 4 items in my inventory in the US. And then I have a Asia member database, which only has 3. So as you can see, I need to synchronize one of my last items that was recently added to US to the Asia database. So I go into the sync product databases to create a new sync group. And here I set up the sync name, US to Asia. It's usually recommended to set up a new metadata database, which has to be in the same region as your hub database. So that's something to keep in mind. And for the pricing tier, I'll just put it as a basic database. This is a very small, simple workload. I'll use the default collation. So here I can choose, do I want automatic sync? And I said, yes, I want sync to be triggered every 2 seconds with a hub win conflict resolution policy. And I want to use private link for security purposes. Here you can learn more about it. And I create the sync group. Very important, for your sync group to be created, you must manually approve the private link between the hub and the sync service. So what we have to do right now is to go to the manual approval. See, you have a pending private endpoint connection, which you have to manually approve. So we are approving that. Only once we do that, the sync group gets created. Then I want to add some members. So I have to log in on my hub database with the server credentials And I want to add a member database, which in my case is also Azure, and it's in Asia. So I select the server to which this database belongs. I select the database, and I select that I want bidirectional sync from hub to member, member to hub, and I have to log in on the server side as well. Again, I use private link between the sync service and this member database for security reasons, but again, I have to manually approve it before the member gets added to the sync group. And because of that, I'll show you a different way to approve a private endpoint connection through the Azure portal. So you can go on the server side for that Asia database, go into private endpoint connections, and there you can see all your pending ones. So I want to approve this one manually such that I can continue using sync. Great. All good. Let's move onwards. This is taking a bit of time. Once I've created a sync group with the hub and member, I can go and select which tables I want to synchronize. So I refresh the schema. As you can see, for our simple workload, we only have one table, just a second, which has 3 columns. So I just select that I want all columns synchronized. And then I have to do the same for the member database. It's loading, same. I have a primary key, which is good. That and now I get to the sync group. So the sync group has been created. As you can see, it shows up in my sync groups. It has 2 databases, member and hub, 1 table that is being synchronized across this. You can see some logs for monitoring purposes in the portal. And now I want to see, has my additional inventory item from the US actually been synchronized to Asia? That should have already happened since I set up such a low sync frequency, right, of a few seconds. So now I'm going to access both of these databases, and we expect to have same items in both of them. As you can see, also data sync, similar to change data capture, creates some artifacts table on your source database. So you must make sure you have enough space there for that. And we're on the member side because we want to see if that 4th inventory item from the US, the melon, had shown up with this price. And it seems like it did. So both databases are in sync right now, which is great. We just had sync trigger from hub to member, from US to Asia. But now I also want sync from member to hub because I set up bidirectional sync. So I'm inserting a new item in the Asia database. So I insert a dragon fruit there. However, I made a spelling error, so we'll have to fix that. Yes, as expected. So now let's see if this gets redirected back to the hub in the US. And as I was mentioning, let's see US. You can see this did not show up yet here because there is a sync latency as well, apart from just the frequency. So we'll wait a few seconds, go back to US, and indeed the dragon fruit shows up here. So this is perfect. We have set up bidirectional replication between Asia and the US, and it all works. So let's move onwards. Great. So one other replication type that I wanted to discuss today is change tracking. So this allows you to record the rows in a table that were changed, but without capturing the actual data that was changed. So if you remember for CDC, you actually also capture historical data changes, but for change tracking, as you can see here, you can see, oh, what type of DML change occurred on each of these rows. So this is pretty much how change tracking works. It records that rows in a table were changed, but without capturing the actual change data. So there are some key change tracking concepts. So you have a change tracking table similar to CDC. You also have a change tracking functions, some query functions. So these supply the details of the changes in an easily consumed relational format. So for instance, the following functions return information about the changes, such as change table of changes. That's what you would use. This returns tracking info for all the changes to a table that have occurred since the specified version. You can use the change table version function to return the latest change tracking information for a specified row. And then you have an auto cleanup that scans the user databases to identify change tracking enabled databases, and based again on the retention cleaning policy, which is all time-based, each internal on-disk table is purged of any expired records. And lastly, you have the change tracking current version. So every time a user accesses a table, they can ask the version number active at that moment. So you must keep that version number safely stored, and then you can just use that version number the next time you do change tracking to get changes since then. So here, sometimes people mix change tracking and change data capture because they are very similar. So, but there are also some key differences that I wanted to highlight. So for change tracking, it shows which rows have been inserted, updated, deleted, and the net changes based on the version number, as I was previously mentioning. However, change data capture takes the historical data changes. And because of that, on the performance side, this consumes more overhead. However, some similarities are that both change tracking and CDC get enabled at the database level and then at the table levels.
Mara,
yes.
maybe you would like to wrap a little bit?
Yes,
soon?
I'm wrapping up this one.
Okay.
We are at 30 minutes, right?
So we are over 5 minutes.
Oh, we are over 5 minutes. Okay, my slides were saying that we are 29 minutes because I was tracking. Okay, I'll wrap it up very quickly. Sorry. Yes, so both change tracking and CDC can be enabled on the same database. No special considerations required. Great. Here you can see how you can enable change tracking. I guess we'll have this slides shared, and you can go through them. Transactional replication, we don't have time to go through it. However, the key details here is that you have a snapshot agent, a log reader agent, and a distribution agent. So it's quite different from what we've seen in seeing change data capture, change tracking. And these are some considerations to have in mind for transactional replications. So this is what we discussed today, and here are the scenarios that we looked at very briefly, and some of the solutions. We took some of these solutions out. Hopefully the demos and all the info was helpful to you. If you have any information, feel free to reach out. And yeah, this is all. Thank you.
All right, Mara, that was an absolutely amazing session. I do know there's not many sessions on internet around data replication in Azure SQL. So I believe definitely people watching it live right now, and once we archive it on Channel 9 and on the website, they'll get to learn from it. And I personally feel that I should be able to go ahead and deliver this session next time because I have seen it so many times. So.
Yes. I'll just let you play next time.
All right, Mara, any final thing you want to plug in before we move to the next session?
No, this is all great. Thank you. And if there are questions, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn, Twitter. I'm happy to respond questions.
All right, Mara, thank you so much. I'd love to have you back once again. Have a nice day ahead. And yeah, bye-bye. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right, with that session by Mara on Azure data replication, we now move to our next session. And I find the title of the next session very interesting. It's like from oops to oops. Incident response with notebooks. So let's go ahead and welcome Shafiq Ur-Rahman and Julie Koesmarno for our next session. Hi, everyone.
All
welcome
right.
to Cloud Summit 2021.
Hello.
All right. So Thanks for accepting the invitation. So, Julie, where are you joining us today from?
I'm actually currently in San Diego, so it's very sunny here.
Yeah, I can see it. And what about you, Shafiq?
Yeah, I'm from Redmond, Washington, from Microsoft headquarters. Yeah.
Wow, that's a great place from to tune in. I won't take much of your time. We're gonna do chit chat towards the end, so there's no bonus of your time. Take your entire 25 minutes. I'm gonna add your slide to the stream. Everybody can see it, and next 25 minutes is all yours.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Simon. All right, folks. Let's learn more about the incident response with Jupyter Notebooks. So, some of you probably have heard me and others talk about Jupyter Notebooks quite a bit. But today we're going to show you how to apply some of the basic things that you have done in Jupyter Notebooks, as well as some of the software engineering practices to be able to apply it in the incident response sort of world. So, as you may already know, data estates getting more complex and systems are getting more complex as well. How do we, think about using troubleshooting guides in a different way, because it might be the weakest link for toward your happy customers. All right, so here we go. So joining me today is Shafiq, who is my partner in crime, who is the software engineering manager at work at Microsoft. So he and I work together in this world of TSG Ops. So, and I am Tiago Koesmarno. I'm a program manager at Microsoft as well. All right, so these are some of the learning journey today. So first of all, I wanted to highlight, if you actually go to that link of the bit.ly link, you will be able to take a look at the slides today. So you can just follow through as I'm going through this with you if you'd like. And I'll be updating the session notes as well on that link. All right, so our 4 learning items today are, the first one is, why incident response? Why is it so hard? So let's talk about the problem statement. And then we'll talk about how do we rethink about troubleshooting guides in a different light? And how do we think about using executable, reusable, automatable troubleshooting guides with Jupyter Notebooks and tying it all together? So that's our last bit, which is a demo. And then we'll share with you the resources where you can get started as well. Now, first of all, we wanted to set a kind of baseline here. So when so Shafiq and I talk about troubleshooting guides or TSG, it really does mean similar to like playbook and runbook or knowledge base. So we don't distinguish it just for the simplicity purposes, but at times you would have to kind of think about it in 2 different lights, which is, steps to identify issues or procedures to achieve specific outcome, or essentially maybe how to mitigate as an example. But in this context, let's just refer to them as just TSG, just to make it simple. And if you are new to notebooks, check out other videos that I have created before for other conferences. Also, if you're new to parameterization in notebooks, I do also highly recommend checking out Aaron Nelson's parameterization in Azure Data Studio. He presented it at Data Exposed, a really good coverage on how to do parameterization in Azure Data Studio for notebooks. So if you're pretty new to notebooks, so this is the screen just showing like a quick kind of overview of what you can do with notebooks, essentially, code and then the results and then documentation as well in one place. So let's step back a little bit here. So what is the problem that we're trying to solve in the incident response sort of world? Now, firstly, I'd like to begin with a question. Where do you store your troubleshooting guides or your knowledge base today whenever you have, this incident response? How do you go back to that documentation that helps you to troubleshoot issues? So how do you store it? Do you store it in OneNote? Do you store it in PDFs? Do you store it in Wiki? Do you store them as scripts? And where do you store them? Is it in SharePoint? Is it actually version controlled? Is it on the network drive? And then have you thought about the permission aspect of it, confidential sort of, policy around it? How about securing it? And lastly, how do you think about making it recoverable? Like, what if the troubleshooting guides are gone? Like, how do you recover from it? So these are some of the big questions that sometimes quite forgotten, but you should really look into it again, especially in the, this 24/7 sort of world. It's definitely worth revisiting that. And there are two sets of keystrokes that are very, very often used, and it actually can be quite dangerous, which is Control-C, Control-V. So you do a lot of copying from code from one place, perhaps your OneNote or other places, and then paste it to, say, for example, SQL Server Management Studio or Azure Data Studio, etc. So a lot of copying this code and then modifying. So essentially, in the SRE or site reliability engineering world or DevOps world, this is considered as toil. So it sounds subtle, but it is actually very erroneous. So, so something to consider there. So if I were to summarize the troubleshooting guide's challenges today, is the fact that you do a lot of copying and pasting with the static troubleshooting guides. It's hard to discover. It's hard to keep track of changes. And think about the quality as well. Is it testable? What if you actually ship a new system? Is your troubleshooting guide actually testable or have or match or in parity with that new version? And what if you want to crowdsource troubleshooting guides? And is it easy to search? And it's actually also not reusable and also not automatable. If we were looking at the state of DevOps research from 2019, there was a section that was called Productivity, Burnout, and Juggling Work. I thought this was absolutely relevant to where we are today as well in 2021. So essentially, what they're saying is, in that research is saying that reducing toil is actually quite important. And we want to make the work, this ops world, to be more repeatable, to be more consistent, fast, scalable, and auditable. And that resonates with what we do here today in the TSG ops methodology. I highly recommend to check that study, by the way. It's a really good reading. All right, so what if we take a step forward a little bit here and look at troubleshooting guides in a different light, which is essentially looking at it from software artifacts point of view or software engineering point of view. So if we can make TSGs, your troubleshooting guides content, as software artifacts, so what that really means is you can make them executable, you can make them reusable, and you can make them automatable as well. So if they are software artifacts, then that means you can also potentially do this like the goodness of auto build, auto testing as well, right? So, and actually that's the world where Shafiq is in today. So that's why I'm so excited to have him talk more about how TSG engineering loop works in a moment. Before we get there, let's pause a little bit on the TSG's sort of characteristics that we ideally think would work well. So we like the aspect that, the troubleshooting guides usually have documentation and the fact that it has code, but we want it to be executable. We want it to be auditable. So that means you want to be able to include results, perhaps visualization, perhaps some analysis and interpretation. And this is where notebooks really shine. So imagine putting troubleshooting guides as software artifacts with notebooks. And this is a short plugin to Azure Data Studio, by the way. As you may already know, Azure Data Studio actually supports Jupyter Notebook. So if you want to try that, just go to ak.ms, get Azure Data Studio. But feel free to use other Jupyter Notebook, I suppose, IDE that works for you. For us, Azure Data Studio works really, really well because it allows us to connect to other data sources like SQL Server, Azure SQL, Postgres, Azure Data Explorer, actually Azure Monitor Logs soon as well. So from troubleshooting, especially data in the data world, it's really ideal for a lot of users today. All right, with that, I'm going to hand it to Shafiq.
Thank you, Julie. So as Julie pointed out, troubleshooting guides are very important artifacts to be able to deliver on the promises of reliability, supportability, and all the service level agreements you have. So we believe that we should have an engineering discipline behind it. Like if you think of OneNote, Word documents, they're just stored there. There's not much engineering discipline. Like there's no testing behind it. There's not much review behind it. So if you look at the diagram on the right, those are a couple of loops we've identified where we think this is how troubleshooting guides are used, and that's what we've seen on our teams. So you add and update a troubleshooting guide. Now, if you do think about notebooks, you would change the notebook. Now you can check it in, and we are checking it into a GitHub repo or a Git repository. So that allows people to review the changes and approve them. And then we also believe in testing the troubleshooting guides. And once it's all checked in and ready and tested, you can manually execute it. That's the inner loop you're seeing there. So the developer, when they're handling an incident, would go and manually execute it. And then, as you do with the incidents and tickets, if you have post-mortem meetings, that's where you would also identify improvements you need to do to your TSGs or new TSGs which needs to be added, and you can create tasks for that and keep doing this loop and improving your process over time. Now, the outer loop you're seeing there is about automation. So once you've tested, you could also automate things like deploy it to an execution framework, and then use those same notebooks you're using manually to do like auto detect incidents or do auto root cause analysis and things like that. Right. And so notebooks are a simple format. It's a JSON document, and we're using Git for version control. So it's a very simple system, very flexible. You can take it to any environment you have. If you have some secure environments, or if you have environments which are only on-prem without online access, this can be modified to suit your needs. Right? And notebooks are easily shareable. And the beauty of notebooks is they also store the results in them. So once you execute something, let's say there's been failures or successes, those items or those executions become inherent part of the notebook when you save it and share it with people. So that allows you to do debugging or forensic analysis of what happened while the incident was being mitigated. So I'll give it back to you, Julie.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Shafiq. Okay, let's go to the next slides. All right. So how do we think about executable, reusable, automatable TSS with Jupyter notebooks here? So essentially, like we've talked about before, if we can build from the executable, we can achieve that reusable and we can achieve that automatable. And therefore, it's going to be less toil. So reduced manual execution, right? So when we think about executable, you can think of it as simply like it has to be able to be run on a user interface. So that way you can develop your content, your troubleshooting guides, and you can also test it manually. You can, run it and it actually works. And this is where Jupyter Notebooks in Azure Data Studio works really well, because you can do that. And then the second one is being able to parameterize it. So if you want to be able to make it a little bit more scalable, it has to be parameterizable. What that really means is, say, if you have a troubleshooting guide for a specific SQL data source, as an example, it should also be able to be run against other data sources. So you should be able to parameterize that. And Jupyter Notebook supports that, and Azure Data Studio supports you to be able to parameterize your notebooks as well if you're running PowerShell or Python. And then the automation aspect of it is actually fairly simple today, and it's going to be a lot better, hopefully, in the upcoming months. So the first one is, if you are using SQL Notebook today and you want to run it against multiple servers or databases, I would highly recommend checking out this Invoke SQL Notebook commandlet, which means you can run it on PowerShell. And then if you are using PowerShell notebooks, then I would highly recommend using Invoke Execute Notebook. And that allows you to run PowerShell notebooks. And then lastly, if you're using Python, then Papermill is the sort of go-to standard. So essentially, if you are using PowerShell or Python today, you're actually quite a way there, as in like you're almost set. So essentially now, when we think about automatable, now the question is, what systems or automation solutions, I suppose, that support either PowerShell or Python? These are pretty popular languages, right? So you'll be able to kind of invoke these commandlets or use Papermill as an example, Papermill package. So I would highly recommend trying this out as well if you're new to automation or new to trying to automate notebooks. All right. So what have we covered today? So troubleshooting guides could be a way for you to kind of improve your incident response today, like rethinking about how you approach troubleshooting guides using software engineering practices like Shafiq has mentioned before, thinking about troubleshooting guides as software artifacts using Jupyter notebooks and building up that executable to reusable to automatable troubleshooting guides. So next then, let's wrap it up with what can we automate and then some demo. All right, so there are two types of automations that you can do. So in the incident response world, you have the diagnosis aspect, and then you also have the detection and mitigation. So with that, I'll let Shafiq to chime in some more on the automation aspects that we've thought about in TSG Ops, and we've also implemented too.
So on the next slide, you'll see the workflow. Or in this diagram, you'll see what auto diagnose and RCA means. So when a ticket is filed, this is all automation without any human intervention. So when we can run some queries, this could be part of the notebook. So notebook is executed. You can run queries on your telemetry, or even make some REST API calls to your service to get some information and enhance the ticket. So you're getting information and adding back to the ticket. So what happens is when the developer or DRI opens the ticket, the information is ready for them. So Julie was mentioning a bunch of toil in the past. So what this does is removes a bunch of the time you spend or minutes you spend in the beginning of your investigation, going to a bunch of systems, running queries, is automatically handled for you. And this makes a huge difference in your time to mitigate and time to detect and investigate. So for this kind of workflow, it's very simple. You need only read-only access. So the environment executing the notebook just needs read-only access to logs and read-only access to service endpoints, and maybe write-only access to the ticketing system so that it can write back. Then the other thing Julie mentioned was auto detection and auto mitigation. So over here, this is more a flow which is working on a timer. So from time to time, the system kicks off a notebook which can detect a problem. Like it could run a query, and if it detects a problem, it can go and log a failure. And in addition to that, the next step it could check is there a safe mitigation? And if it knows that, then it can perform the action to take care of the incident. So this is the happy path where everything's handled, no human is involved, and your system is back up and running. Now, if you do not detect a safe mitigation, you can file a ticket that becomes the auto detect scenario. And if you don't find a problem, you're also logging a success, and you're getting some telemetry saying, hey, the system is looking good. So in this scenario, you need a little more permissions, like you need read-write permissions to logs because you're writing back. Even on the service endpoint, you need some write permissions so that you can take some actions to fix the service. So over here, you have to be a little careful where you have to identify actions which are safe and only do those because you don't want to open your system up. Because if you have issues or bugs in your TSGs, you don't want them bringing down your system. So a little more care needs to be taken for auto mitigation, but it is possible to identify some high impact incidents and auto mitigate them. So back to you, Julie.
All right, thanks, Shafiq. Okay, let's go through a simple demo how we can illustrate how it actually can work from the incident response sort of ticketing system or support case system all the way to an execution of notebooks. So before I start with this, let me show you one thing here. So assume that, so let me just double check. Yeah, this is the one. So assume I have this DB Diagnostics notebook, which I actually borrowed from Glenn Berry's Azure SQL Database Diagnostic Information Queries. So I've taken some excerpts of this notebook and essentially think that, hey, if there is an incident assigned to me, I want this diagnostics notebook to be run before I read it. So essentially pre-execute this so that I don't have to execute it manually. I don't have to do that copying, pasting code, right? So that's what I aim to do. And in fact, let me just switch over to here. So in fact, I actually have published that dbdiagnostics.ipynb file to my GitHub. So I'm hoping that the system, the incident ticketing system, can actually pick up this notebook from GitHub and then just run it. And then when it's assigned to me, I can just read it, right? I can read the outcome. So as you can see here, just kind of showing you, there is no result sets. The notebook is just kind of clean. So there's no results. It's just a bunch of code like such. All right, so what I wanted to do is, let me just go back to PowerPoint here. When there is a incident or a support case that is assigned to me, it will automatically execute the notebook, and then it will also post the link of the notebook outcome. So this is the pre-executed notebooks with the result on the ticket, and then hopefully it also gets emailed to me. How wonderful is that? Or maybe not so much because, you know, your inbox might be pretty full, but at least the notebooks part is being pre-executed, right? So let's go here a little bit just to kind of make it real as we can. So let me just do F11 here. Oh, doesn't kind of make me, never mind. I was gonna make it a little bit bigger, the browser, but it didn't let me. Anyhow, so I do have a ticket here, which is called slow query. It hasn't been assigned to anybody. So I'm just opening it. It looks like it hasn't been assigned to anybody. The notes here just says Cloud Summit test, and then that's pretty much it. So now I'm going to assign it to me. And then I'm just gonna close this for a moment, and then we'll get back to it because the execution should take a couple of minutes. So what happens in the back end is essentially when that ticket that I just showed you, so this I'm using Planner as kind of to illustrate an incident response system or support case system, right? So in the back end, when I assign that, when that ticket is assigned to me, it's going to trigger this Azure Logic Apps workflow, which will run Azure Automation, which will run this TSG notebook from GitHub. We'll fetch it from there and then run it and then store it into an Azure storage, Azure Blob Storage, so that I can view it later. So with that, let's take a look inside the inside the Azure Logic Apps workflow itself. So this is what we have today. So I have a demo TSG workflow, logic app, and if I click on edit, it will show me the flow. So it will say that when a task is assigned to me on Planner, then I'm going to create a new instance of essentially of a job of the Azure Automation job. So I have my automation account execute notebook here, and I have the runbook name InfoSQL notebook. The magic actually happens in this InfoSQL notebook, which I will show you momentarily. And what it's going to do is it's going to pass the parameter, the title of that ticket into the InfoSQL notebook. If you recalled earlier, the title of my ticket actually has a server name and database name, right? So it's going to parse that. And then after that, it's just going to update the planner task, and then with some content here. And then lastly, it is going to send me an email. So it's going to send me an email with the link to the planner, with the link to the notebook itself. So now let's dig into the InfoSQL notebook runbook, which is part of the Azure Automation. It's essentially just a PowerShell. So if I click on edit here, and it's just PowerShell. So it takes the title parameter. It's just doing some kind of fancy extraction of server name and database name. And then after that, it's going to go to my GitHub account. In a moment, there it is. Going to my GitHub account here. And yeah, just fetching it so that I can execute it against invoke SQL notebook commandlet. All right, so yeah, so that's going to run the server name and database name. And then afterwards, it's going to post it to the Azure storage account. So the rest of the code is essentially to post it to Azure storage account. All right, so what you've seen today is essentially someone, it just happened to be me at the time, but someone else could write a TSG notebook and publish it on GitHub. And then so that if, say, for example, a support person, say, for example, Tim, create a task and assign it to a DBA, it will invoke all this beautiful workflow and run the appropriate notebooks, obviously. And then so that when it gets assigned to somebody, say, for example, Gloria or myself, it's going to have all the details that is needed. So with that, I'm just going to show you quickly. Looks like it's done. So take a look here. A new notebook has just been created. And then last but not least, because this is probably the key thing that we wanted to show you, essentially, hey, I've got an email and it just got sent to me. Local time is 9:43. So if I click on that, it will say, do you want to open it in Azure Data Studio? And I say yes. So, and then click open. Yeah, download it. So it just it's just opening the notebook execution, the pre-executed notebook. So if I scroll down, then I can see that, you know, certain cells have been, actually all the cells have been run, so I can start doing the diagnosis. So essentially less copying and pasting, everything is pre-run for me. So we covered this a little bit before, so I'm just gonna speed it up since we're actually running out of time. And I want to be respectful of the next speaker as well. So essentially, you can have author and you can have consumer, and there is the pipeline of the TSG repo and validation that you can use. And this is super important, especially if you have a pipeline that can check your kind of cred scan or passwords, etc., that might be actually accidentally included in your troubleshooting guides. That would be that should be something that you want to kind of consider. So yeah, today I showed you GitHub repo, and then the task workflow is just using Planner and Azure Logic apps. All right, so just wanted to wrap up the useful resources or some of the things that you can do today. So first is learn Jupyter Notebooks. And if you're really, really new with Jupyter Notebooks and really new with Python, I would highly recommend using Azure Data Studio. That's how I also got started as well. Got started really diving into notebooks more. And then think about how you can format your TSCs to be more executable and reusable. And then think about automation as well, because this is the part where it will save you time and hopefully give you that, advantage, winning advantage over other companies or competitors, as an example. So just to wrap up, I've got a bunch of references that I have shared here on the slides that you can take a look at your free time. I would like to especially thank the community, because without them, this wouldn't happen as well, because, for example, Glenn Berry's diagnostic notebooks have been super helpful for a lot of people. Rob Sewell has talked about Jupyter Notebooks as well. Doug Fink talked about how to use PowerShell notebooks in PowerShell. In fact, he is the creator of the PowerShell notebook module for Invoke Execute notebook. And lastly, Emmanuel also has created this SQL diagnostic Jupyter book. So with that, I think I'm going to end. I might actually, if I can, go to, let's see. I wanted to show you this because in case you missed the slides, go to this bit.ly link, because it will contain the updated slide deck in 5 minutes hopefully, as well as all the session notes. And follow me on Twitter for any additional updates as well, which is MS SQL Girl. All right.
Thank you.
All right, that was a great session. I've always used Notebook just for writing some code, but looks like Azure Data Studio is on steroids. I mean, you guys and girls have built such a great product. My only quick question is, how do you actually decide what new feature to go ahead and add it? I host many program managers, product managers. Everyone follows a very different approach, right? So what approach do you follow? Because I see Jupyter Notebook is something that is built on top, right? It is used very widely. So how do you guys and girls go ahead and say, okay, this is the feature we are going to build this quarter?
Yeah, great question. So we take feedback from users. So if you go to GitHub, Microsoft Azure Data Studio, fortunately I don't have the link handy, but we are on GitHub. So you can actually raise issues there. So we triage them, we take a look at them. We also present at places like this, and then hear your feedback as well. And we also do user research to decide which way should we go, etc. We have a lot of use base of from external as well as internal. So yeah, lots of great feedback from folks, and keep them coming, because that's the only way we can improve the product for sure.
All right, that's absolutely great. So we'll move to next session now. Any final things, Shafiq and Julie, you want to plug in?
Just wanted to say thank you, Simon, for having us, and hopefully we'll see you again next time. And don't forget to check out Azure Data Studio.
Yeah.
Same here. Thank you, Simon.
Yeah, thank you, Shafiq, and thank you, Chiri. I believe the Azure Data Studio is also on Twitter, right? So go ahead and follow them for latest updates. Thank you, both of you. Really enjoyed hosting you. We'll love to have you back once again, hopefully in person. I hope I get the visa. But until then, take good care of yourself. Have a nice ahead, and see ya. Ta-ra. Bye.
See you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
All right, with that, we now move to the final session of the day. And I'm really excited for this one because I'm hosting Shannon for the very first time. And she's going to talk about Azure VMware Solutions Overview. And I have to be very, very honest. I did see one of her tweets where I always go ahead and type the VMware in the wrong way. I still do it. Even when I was reading her session, I thought, okay, that's how we write it. The first two letters are capital. All right, so let's welcome our next speaker, Shannon, to talk about Azure VMware Solutions Overview. Welcome to Cloud Summit. Hi, Shannon. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing great. I love your background. There's so many posters. What are they about?
So I'm a DJ, right? That's how I got into technology. And so a lot of it it's concert stubs on the door. It's a handful of posters of some of my favorite musical artists, and none of them, well, I guess outside of the Smashing Pumpkins, none of them are American-based bands. So it's just kind of an accumulation over the course of probably my 20s and 30s, just picking up, memorabilia at concerts and things of that sort.
My 20s has gone doing all these live shows, so I only have the screenshots with me.
That's good. That's perfectly fine. Some of these screenshots are great, though. They're really great background stuff,
I'll try put some screenshots. Shannon, I know we're already in minute, so 10 minutes in your session, but it's all yours. 20, 25, 30 minutes is all yours. So take your all time. I'm going to add it to your stream, your screenshot of the stream. Everybody can see it. And next 25, 30, 45 minutes is all yours.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Simon. I appreciate it. So hi, everyone. I'm Shannon Kuehn, and yes, it's pronounced Kuehn. It doesn't look like it. I'm a senior cloud advocate at Microsoft. In my role, I spend a lot of time talking about Azure infrastructure, and one of the big topics that I've been focusing on specifically the last year and a half has been Azure VMware Solution. And yes, a lot of people do capitalize the W. It's not capitalized. So if you want to make it seem like you know VMware, just make sure that you spell it capital V, capital M, W-A-R-E. So, if you want to connect with me as time unfolds, I tend to share a lot of good information on Twitter and LinkedIn. So these are great ways to get in touch with me. My DMs are always open as well, whether that be on LinkedIn or Twitter. So if you've got questions, you want to understand something a little bit better, feel free to connect with me and write me something if you don't want to be more public and ask me the questions online that everybody else can see. So thanks for having me, Simon. I definitely appreciate it. It's been a weird year and a half. It keeps moving longer and longer. So these virtual things are always kind of a fun reality. So let's start with the introduction and the background of the service. I think that's going to make a lot of sense here as folks become more familiar with the solution. So Azure VMware Solution delivers a comprehensive VMware environment as a service. This allows customers to run VMware native workloads exactly as they run on premises, except it's in Azure. So customers get a chance to capitalize on their existing VMware investments, skills, and tools. So all of that time customers have spent learning vCenter, vSAN, vSphere, you can take that, plug it into Azure. This option provides you with the most symmetry in terms of your on-premises workloads. So most of our customers are running the version that gets deployed with Azure VMware Solution on-premises. So you get to take your existing applications and you get to have that familiar platform. And it's a great win-win for customers that have been a little hesitant to moving towards the cloud. This is essentially running VMware natively on Azure. So you've got your on-premises data center, which is comprised of vCenter, vSphere, vSAN, and NSX. You connect that into Azure. The recommended pattern is to connect it with an express route circuit. You'll then deploy the software-defined data center, or SDDC. You'll get vCenter, vSphere, vSAN, NSX. And you could even think about extending what you're doing with Site Recovery Manager, or SRM. That reached general availability back in July. So if you aren't yet ready to even migrate your workloads on premises, you could think about Azure being a target for your disaster recovery environment. The minimum deployment for Azure VMware Solution is 3 dedicated bare metal nodes. Those are your dedicated servers. Nobody else has access to them. It's not logically separate like most of Azure. With that deployment comes an express route circuit. That express route circuit gets peered into an Azure VNet, and that's what gives you access to the Microsoft Azure Backbone network. Once all of this is connected, and I think the hardest part is network connectivity, you can start onboarding Azure services like Azure Active Directory, any of the Azure security services, Azure SQL Database, Azure Monitor. You can think about extending what you're doing with an application gateway or even artificial intelligence. We had a first iteration of this back in, I want to say it was late 2018, early 2019. We have since gone a different direction and we have this first party service. This reached general availability last September. And if you followed the service over the course of its lifespan at Microsoft, you'll notice that the first iteration didn't have nearly as many regional availability points. Hopefully what you're seeing here is that Microsoft has invested in making this be a global service. All of the planned regions are available on our public website. And just note that if you are hoping for one of these planned regions to come online and maybe the date slips, that is a possibility. So just be prepared to work with your Microsoft counterparts to understand what the timetables look like if you are thinking about deploying Azure VMware Solution in one of the planned regions. Right now, if you were to deploy Azure VMware Solution, this is the software specifications and the hardware specifications. I won't spend too much time talking about it, but this shouldn't feel too foreign. Most of our customers are running this flavor of vSphere on premises. And then in terms of the hardware specification, we only have one SKU at the present time. This could always evolve and change. It's going to be an interesting service as the entire ecosystem sort of pivots and looks at embracing this as a way to speed up transformation. So the actual nodes themselves are hyper-converged nodes. And so you're getting massive compute and massive resources to be able to run your workloads in Azure. The big part of this slide, though, I want to call out at the bottom. There's a minimum of 3 nodes per vSphere cluster. You can't go lower than that. There's a maximum of a maximum of 12 clusters per private cloud, a maximum of 16 nodes per vSphere cluster, and then a maximum of 96 nodes to an Azure Private Cloud instance. Hopefully you're seeing that we can think about a lot of different types of scale, and you can scale up and scale down on demand. Let's spend some time talking about the deployment process next. So right now, you will deploy the private cloud in Azure. It's just like a lot of other Azure resources. In fact, I've got a video demo that walks through this. You'll create a VNet, and then you'll create an Azure Bastion and a jump host. You could always create a jump host with a public IP that has just-in-time as well. Bastion is not in every single region. Just note that you will need some sort of way to access the web GUI once Azure VMware Solution deploys. So you'll create a gateway subnet in that VNet, and this is to link that express route circuit into your Azure VNet. And after deployment, you'll link that SDDC to the VNet. From there, you'll connect to the jump host behind the Azure Bastion. service, or you'll enable just-in-time to get into that server. You'll connect to the vCenter environment, then you'll connect to the NSXT environment. Those credentials are registered with Azure. You're not putting a password in. That's all done via automation by way of deploying the service. You'll next enable global reach for on-premises access. So the recommended pattern, and we'll talk about this, is to have your express route circuit on-premises peered into Azure, and then you've got an express route circuit that's peered into Azure, and you'll enable global reach to handle traffic routing between those two environments. The last thing you'll want to do is you'll want to join the domain, and you'll want to configure your identity source. And that is done right now with a support ticket into Microsoft, just because of the fact that you don't technically have access to the root of your ESXi hosts. So let's talk about network architecture, because I've hinted that it's probably the hardest thing to wrap your head around. So there's two types of connectivity models with Azure VMware Solution. There's basic interconnectivity, which is what is shown on the slide. This is what happens when you deploy the Azure VMware Solution service. The express route circuit gets deployed, and you have a virtual network, and then you link the express route circuit into the Azure VNet. This is what helps you integrate with Azure native services. And sometimes customers don't need that hybrid connectivity right away as well. So this is what's called basic interconnectivity. The networking is interesting. So there is a management network that Azure VMware Solution only leans on, and it should be a non-overlapping IP address with your Azure VNet as well as on premises. It's just like extending your network connectivity if you were moving everything into IaaS. So the management network itself, it requires a minimum of a /22 CIDR address block. You can always make that bigger. The recommended pattern, though, is just to make sure that nothing overlaps. And then the corresponding Azure VNet won't be an overlapping IP address space, and it'll have to have that gateway subnet to terminate the express route circuit into that Azure VNet. Then there's full interconnectivity. And this is what I've talked about, right? The idea that you need your express route circuit from on-premises to connect into Azure, and then you need your express route circuit from Azure VMware Solution to be peered into an Azure VNet. When you enable global reach, that's a fully supported SLA-backed guarantee from a migration pattern. So if you need to migrate VMs from on-premises all the way into Azure, you will need that express route circuit if it's a production-based environment. I think one of the biggest caveats here is in the next slide. There is an opportunity to set up a site-to-site VPN using a vWAN hub. Now, the vWAN hub does the same thing that the global reach will do. It'll handle east-west traffic routing. The big piece here, though, is if you are migrating production workloads and something happens and you call Microsoft for support, VMware might be engaged, and VMware will ask almost immediately, is there an express route circuit? So we always stress that this is something you can do for testing before the express route circuit shows up, because sometimes that takes some time. Or you could, if you just need hybrid connectivity, this could be a recommended pattern as well. When it comes to the migration side of things, let's walk through those steps. So you'll want to first assess your VMware environment, and you can do that now with Azure Migrate. That reached general availability right around the Ignite timeframe of this year. That will help you identify the workloads to migrate. A lot of times customers don't know what they have. They've given folks access to build up servers at will, and nobody really knows what's showing up. So there's a lot of sprawl on premises. Once you have that assessment, once you've identified the workloads, you can define the migration approach. There's a product that VMware uses called HCX. This is the Swiss Army knife of migration. This is what handles the vMotioning of a VM from on-premises all the way into Azure VMware Solution. And HCX supports live, bulk, or cold migration. Most customers pick live, especially if it's a production-based workload, because it's minimal downtime. But if you do get a change window, or maybe there's a dev environment that you need to move over and it's not on all the time, those two patterns are also supported. This helps you identify the steps to full production. And then that enables you to move to the proof of concept side of things. This is where you create the private cloud. You move a few VMs using the preferred migration type, and you sort of build up that familiarity as to what Azure VMware Solution looks like in terms of Azure. This then helps you transition to production. So there's the at-scale migration and adoption, right? So once everything's up, once you've vetted everything, everything's been tested, everything's been deployed, you can start to think about migrating those VMs pretty readily. And if you don't have the cycles, Microsoft does have Fast Track, and we've got a partner ecosystem that requires certification from Microsoft each year to be able to work with partners or well, not work with partners, work with customers to migrate VMs into Azure VMware solution. So let's talk a little bit about management and support next, because I think that's where a number of questions still show up. So oftentimes we see the shared responsibility matrix for IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. This is the shared responsibility matrix for Azure VMware solution. Hopefully what you're seeing here in the slide is that a lot of the burden of responsibility falls on Microsoft. So you're no longer getting the pages or the emails at 2 a.m. when your power supply fails. That's usually when it likes to fail, 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. You don't have to worry about patching your ESXi hosts. You don't have to worry about upgrading the hosts. You don't have to worry about physical security. Microsoft is focusing on that for you. This frees up your engineering cycles so you can focus on things like lifecycle management for VMs. So if you've got older OSs still in your environment, this allows your engineers to start thinking about what an upgrade path would look like to move to a newer OS. You could even think about bringing on configuration management. A lot of customers, because they are doing the full gambit of support related to their VMware environments on premises, when they transition that burden of responsibility or a good chunk of that burden of responsibility over to Microsoft, they can start to figure out what it would take to bring into consideration configuration management. So the support structure is also cool here. If you are running Azure VMware solution and you run into a problem, you are only calling Microsoft. So Microsoft becomes that point, that central point of support and escalation. Microsoft troubleshoots all of the Azure native components. Is it something with networking? Is it something with access to the portal, right? Once that has been determined that it's not an Azure specific issue, Microsoft on behalf of you will go to VMware and open up a ticket with VMware. You don't have to open up a ticket on your behalf with VMware. So then Microsoft continues to sort of play point until you reach full resolution in your environment. One of the coolest things here is talking through integrations. So I often say it's like achievement unlocked when you have your Azure VMware solution environment sit so much closer to the ARM APIs. These are some of the popular Azure VMware solution integrations at the moment. So Azure NetApp files for file share. Then there's the blob storage components. So if you're familiar with content libraries and templatizing your VMs, you can have that live on an Azure blob storage account, which is kind of cool. You don't have to move any of that to the vSAN data store, because once you deploy this, you get a vSAN data store, and that's a finite resource, right? Unless you add additional nodes. Then there's iSCSI disk pools, which is in public preview. So it's another way to expand what you're doing related to your storage footprint. So if you don't have to worry about adding an additional node, if you just need additional storage for a short period of time, you could think about using iSCSI disk pools. Then we've got a lot of customers who are looking at Azure Traffic Manager and Application Gateway just for highly available, highly resilient applications. That's hard to do if your environment lives on premises. In fact, I don't think it's possible. So having your Azure VMware Solution VMs sit closer to the ARM APIs is impactful in the sense that you can make use of these Azure native services that don't cost a lot of money just to spin up and to make use of. There's support for hub and spoke. So if you've got hub and spoke already deployed in your environment, you can extend what you're doing into Azure VMware Solution, and that would just trickle into what you're doing from your full-blown enterprise scale digital transformation. Then there's the Microsoft Azure Backup Server. One thing to mention here too is there's a number of third-party backup solutions that are also available at the moment. So Commvault, Veritas, Rubrik, Veeam, I'm sure I'm missing one. There's about 4 or 5 of them that are now certified, with more that are going through certification process right now with Microsoft. So you can either use Microsoft Azure Backup Server to back up your VMs, just like if they lived on premises and you were using Microsoft Azure Backup Server, or you can lean on some of the third-party solutions that might already be in your environment. You can onboard Azure Monitor, as well as Azure Security Center and Azure Sentinel. So I think these are also awesome, because a lot of times folks don't know what they have. They don't know the security posture of their environment. So being able to onboard and expand what you're doing from a security perspective alone helps a lot of customers out with making sure that everything's baselined correctly and configured correctly. In terms of the resources, because I always like to leave folks with a lot of good info, a lot of customers and a lot of folks that I've talked to always ask about hands-on. Well, it's a hard service to do hands-on with. So Microsoft partnered up with VMware to create hands-on labs. Now, if you're familiar with VMware's hands-on labs, it requires a registration, and then you're able to go get familiarity with whatever service you're looking for. It doesn't have to be just Azure VMware Solution, but Azure VMware Solution has a couple of hands-on labs at the moment. These are click-through guided tutorials that help you figure out how to use the service and configure everything correctly. The first 2 labs deal with private cloud deployment and connectivity. So you'll go through the notion of building out the Azure VMware Solution environment and then connecting it into an Azure VNet. And then the other lab deals with onboarding HCX, because remember, that's the piece that migrates everything, and establishing a site pairing from on-premises into Azure, and then migrating VMs. So that's the recommended pattern in terms of being able to migrate VMs from on-premises all the way into Azure. There's a number of ways if that doesn't work out, because usually some customers get to that point where they realize HCX is not going to work with them for whatever reason. There are a number of other ways you can get VMs into Azure VMware Solution, but the recommended pattern to follow until there's something that doesn't work right is HCX. So this lab is really helpful in that aspect. Microsoft also authored a Learn Path. I authored 2 of these 3 modules. So these are great ways to understand everything you have to factor in related to planning. So the first module deals with what is Azure VMware Solution, helps somebody out with the value proposition. Why would you bring this into an environment? And it helps you understand how it's positioned, how you could position it with your company, and hopefully onboard it into your environment. The next module deals with deployment. So it's all of the prereqs that you have to factor in from a networking perspective, from a subscription perspective, from a whitelisting perspective. So in order to onboard the service, you have to whitelist a subscription, and then you're able to onboard the environment into your subscription. So a lot of these different components are covered in that deployment module. And then it'll walk you through what a deployment looks like. It'll have you walk through and deploy the Azure VMware Solution environment, connect it into an Azure VNet, and then you're ready to go for the third module, which deals with HCX. So that walks through the same sort of prereqs required to establish a site pairing from on-premises into Azure over your express route circuit, and then what it looks like to migrate a VM from on-premises into Azure. So I want to walk through the demo next, and I want to add a couple of caveats here. So Azure VMware Solution does take about 3.5 to 4 hours to deploy. So rather than keep you on here for 3.5 to 4 hours when we've already been live for a little over 3, I sped some of this up. So I wanted to show you what it was like to build out Azure VMware Solution, how you build it out in the portal. So this is a great little video demo, and I will just kind of guide what's happening with my voice. So you'll want to go look for the Azure VMware Solution environment. And then once it shows up here, nothing's been deployed, right? So you can go and you can click Create at the top. You can click Create Private Cloud in that blue box. Doesn't really matter. It'll take you to the prereqs page. So if you somehow missed the prereqs, let's say you just decided you were going to go to deploy it, this would at least take you to where it shows up in our documentation, right? So if you didn't take a look at the hands-on labs or the Learn module, this would help you out. So you need an EA agreement or a CSP agreement, and then a valid non-overlapping site or address block. And the recommended pattern is that it's a minimum of /22. It could always be bigger if it needs to be. So it's just like a lot of other Azure resources, right? Tie it to an Azure resource group, give it a name. My specific environment lives in North Central. And then you'll go down here to select the host. Again, there's only one SKU, so it's the AV36 node. And then you'll supply the site or address block. And I picked 10.5.0.0. However, I mistyped it in the demo, but it always works out just fine. And then you can go in and you can add some tags. So tags are a big part of folks related to cost management and chargeback. You can add tags into your Azure VMware Solution environment. Then once you're done, you can select Review and Create. And we'll go through the validation process. Before you hit Create, you can always go down and evaluate all of the settings you had configured. This is always helpful because it does take, like I said, about 4 hours to deploy. If anything wound up getting missed, you can just hit Previous and course correct and fix that before you deploy. So that's as simple as hitting Create, which I don't know if you're like me, that's a very easier reality than having to build out vCenter, VMware environments on premises, right? So in a matter of 4-ish hours, you'll have 3 nodes, a number of servers that are involved in the environment, and everything's up and functional, right? So all of that was abstracted for you behind the Azure Resource Manager portal. So you see over here on the right, all of the 10.5.0.0, that wound up getting carved out by the automation. I just supplied that CIDR address block. And you'll know it worked because you'll see succeeded. So while this is building, it'll say building. So when it says succeeded, this is where you need to go in and you need to now connect the express route circuit into the Azure VNet. So this is a brand new screen. What you wind up doing is you need to have that virtual network that has a gateway subnet. You can create a brand new one, or in my demo, I already have a VNet with a subnet created. You'll select that, and it's a matter of going up to the top and hitting save. And then a number of automation components get kicked off. So go to the same kind of deployment overview. And then you'll get a bunch of things, like you'll get the VNet gateway, the local connection point, the express route, auth key, etc. And you'll know it worked because you'll go down to the connectivity section underneath manage. You'll go to the express route section. And you will see that an auth key has been created and used to connect your express route circuit into an Azure VNet. So this demo encompasses basic interconnectivity. There's more involved if you need to figure out how to deploy this with your on-premises environments. And if you get to that point, you can always reach out. You can always talk to your Microsoft counterparts. There's a number of teams available at this point in time to help you realize the value of this journey. And that is the end of what I have to share today. So thank you for the opportunity, Simon. I definitely appreciate it. I guess I could flip over and see if there's any questions. So let's see.
All right, Shannon, that was great. I think it was a very, very crisp presentation. We do have a couple of questions from the comments. Let's take it. Okay,
yeah, I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it. Yeah. So let's see. So it looks like, what is it? Oh, yeah. So the licensing components are interesting. You don't have to add licensing or deal with licensing for vCenter, vSAN, NSX. That's all taken care of for you. Even the add-on of HCX Advanced, that's taken care of for you. If you need Site Recovery Manager, that's a BYOL license, and that's something you would work on with VMware. But all of that's built into the core package. You don't have to worry about licensing, which is honestly kind of nice.
Yeah. Who wants to deal with license?
Right. I used to always tell people, go talk to your licensing people. Like, I don't know any, I don't pay attention to it. So that's helpful. It's all included.
All right. So we have one from Alan. Alan is saying, Shannon, can you just confirm that express route is a prerequisite or pre-requirement? I don't know. What is that?
So it's a prereq if you need to migrate your VMs on premises into Azure. So when we were talking about the different connectivity models, the full interconnectivity is the one you need if you are migrating VMs from on-premises all the way into Azure VMware Solution. You could stand up a site-to-site VPN tunnel, and you could migrate maybe dev workloads or anything that's non-production based. But when it comes to production, you want to make sure you've got the express route circuit, because if you have a problem with migrating a VM from on-premises all the way into Azure VMware Solution and you have to engage Microsoft and Microsoft has to go engage VMware, VMware's first thing they're going to ask is, how is that migration pattern happening? So in order for them to back that migration pattern with their SLA, they want that to happen over an express route circuit. That could change. That's just where it stands right now. So if you just need maybe site-to-site connectivity, right? You just need hybrid connectivity. You're not planning on migrating VMs. You could have a site-to-site VPN. If you're trying to build out what that looks like, you're trying to build up the notion of moving it from on-premises into Azure, you could have a site-to-site VPN for kind of lower hanging workloads, something that's not production. But when it comes to production and a true migration pattern of all of your heavier production level workloads, you'll want to make sure you have your express route circuit peered into Azure from on-premises.
That's perfect. Pradeep says, amazing session.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. I don't see we have any more questions. Pradeep is saying, is it a VMware on Azure solution? I think.
Yeah, so it's called Azure VMware Solution, or
Mhm.
AVS. You might see it referenced. Inside of our documentation, you'll see it as Azure VMware Solution. We don't abbreviate it. It's weird. We abbreviate a lot of things, but we don't abbreviate Azure VMware Solution in our documentation. So that's the way you'll see it referenced. And I think VMware has an offering in most major clouds too. So
Mhm.
you might see it on AWS, you might see it in GCP. I feel like they're realizing they need to be involved in a lot of different cloud deployments because customers aren't just in one cloud anymore.
Yeah, exactly. We're moving towards multi-cloud, and people have already moved towards multi-cloud.
Right.
So that makes sense.
Right.
All right, that was Shannon. That was absolutely great. I don't see any more questions over there. Any final words or anything final you want to plug in before we end the day?
Just thanks for letting me come and present. It's always an awesome opportunity to collaborate with somebody that I haven't yet really collaborated with. I've just interacted with you on the internets, right? So
Yeah.
it's nice to get a chance to come and collaborate with you and actually participate. So thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for everybody that tuned in.
Thank you so much, Shannon. Thanks for accepting the invitation. Actually, I really appreciate it. We would love to have you back whenever you're available. I know you're a cloud advocate, so I don't think you're going to say no to me.
I love it. I love it. We'll have to keep that in mind.
I put you on the spot, right? It's recorded. All right, Shannon, thank you so much. Have a nice day ahead. We'd love to have you back. And yeah, take care, and we'll see you soon. So,
All right. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye. All right, now that is the end of day 4 of Cloud Summit. Can you imagine? There's still 7 days, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, there's still 11. There's still 7 days to go for Cloud Summit. I even say that even until now, we have covered the entire ecosystem of Azure, but there's still a lot to come. And especially on Sunday, we have an entire day just dedicated for students. How amazing is that? We also have Microsoft Imagine Cup winning team joining us. Then we have Microsoft Student Partners. They call it Microsoft Learn Student Partners. But yeah, people, oh my goodness, Shannon has gone, but people say, wow, thanks for the session. Many thanks for the session. Great session. She was such a treat. Yeah, I really enjoyed hosting. I appreciate your time, Shannon. Yeah, that was absolutely great. I mean, I would say the rhythm that she had, right? There was a very good rhythm in that session. Yeah, and if we just go back and watch it, we're going to put all this session once again on Channel 9 and on Azure Summit Live website, most probably after this summit ends. So definitely go and check that out. Having said that, if you're watching us on Learn TV, we have actually stopped streaming on Learn TV because we have Hello World going on, but we are still live on Microsoft Developers YouTube channel. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to announce the giveaways. How interesting is that? We have been contests going on. So the first giveaway that we are going to do is for the Q&A that people have asked. We have always been telling you that whenever you ask a question to the speakers or share your thoughts, use this Cloud Summit hashtag, and now we're going to do a draw, right? No favorites. We're going to do a draw. So in the count of 3, 2, 1, let's click on this draw button. Boom. Some drum rolls. Let's see who wins Cloud Summit Swag Kit. No, Microsoft developer, you cannot win it. Oh my goodness. Oh, I thought Microsoft developer won it. But hey, Rikin Trivedi, congratulations. You win Cloud Summit Swag Kit. Please take a screenshot of this and drop me an email at simon@azuresummit.live, and we'll make sure that we ship you the goodies in the next month. Having said that, we do know that we have other goodies to be given away, but we will do that. But let's go ahead and actually quickly see what's on the agenda or on day number 5. Okay, let's start. So on day number 5, to get started, let me go ahead and zoom in. Okay, so day number 5, September 17, we have, as always, it's a welcome note by me. So there's nothing new over there. We start the session at 6:30 a.m. Eastern time zone. The first session is by Tayob Ali, who's a Microsoft MVP, and who's going to talk about Azure SQL database. Where is my SQL agent? That's a pretty interesting session topic. So definitely go ahead and tune in tomorrow. And I see there's still comments going on. Oh, wow. People really love Shannon session. Wow. That's great. Shannon says, thanks, Simon. Really to participate. I'll be looking for your next event. I'll get some other goodies to share. Thanks, Shannon. I really enjoyed hosting you. The next session after Taib Ali tomorrow. Now, this is the schedule that I'm showing tomorrow. Tomorrow is September 17, and we start at 6:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Don't worry if you just cannot figure out. Just visit Azure Summit Live after this event ends, and we're going to update the website with the exact video and the chat. So don't worry about that. After that, we have another SQL session that's by Christopher, most probably. That's on SQL Server on Azure. And there's so many sessions just around the SQL. Now, that's amazing. And after that, we have an 30 minutes break. Then we have Tushar Kumar, who is a cloud solution architect. His session is on Friday. Am I showing the wrong day? No, I think I'm doing right. He's going to talk about Azure Arc now got by Sept. This is a very interesting session. So not a problem. All right, then the following session we have Mike Vandergack. He's going to talk about on how you can actually add additional security to your Azure PaaS solutions. Then again, we have a break. A little too many breaks tomorrow, I must say, because tomorrow the day is a little long. Then we have Mustafa Thorman, who is one of our featured speakers, C# MVP, Microsoft MVP. He recently moved to a new position. He's an absolutely amazing community guy, and he's going to talk about Azure DevOps Love Starting. And I know you all want to learn about Azure DevOps. So let's attempt to stay on top. Okay. All right. So the next session after that we have by Tanya, and if it's Tanya, you know, she's going to talk about security, and that's what it is, cloud native security. She's CEO and founder of vHack Purple, and yeah, definitely check that session out. Then we have Ferenc joining us. Ferenc will talk about Azure Synapse Serverless SQL Pool, building logical data warehouse over data lakes and databases. It's going to be a very good hands-on session, I believe. So it's a good session that I'm looking forward for tomorrow. Then we have Shweta Lodha, who is a C# MVP, data analyst, and a full-stack developer, and she's going to cover detect and analyze face using Azure Cognitive Services. So we have database, we have AI going on. We also have sessions around security. And then after that, we have a session on Azure Sentinel from the analyst perspective. That would be by Rod Trent. Rod Trent works at Microsoft as a senior cloud security advocate and global Azure Sentinel SME at Microsoft. Then the final session for tomorrow that we have is by Jen, who's a data engineer, and he's going to talk about getting started with Azure Synapse. So day 5 is going to be packed with the session. It's going to be a little longer than today. Today was, I believe, about 8 hours of summit. So yeah, that's it for the day 5. So for everyone who's watching us on Microsoft Developers YouTube channel, don't worry, you'll get the streams tomorrow, or you can always visit azuresummit.live website and we'll just update all over there. Having said that, let's take a minute break, and after this minute break, if you're watching us on Microsoft Developers YouTube channel, we're gonna stop streaming over there. So yeah, if you want to continue watching for another 5 minutes and see who's going to win the giveaways, visit azuresummit.live. Having said that, let's take a minute break, and I'll be back very soon.
Hi, I'm Anna Hoffman.
Hey friends, I'm Nikolai.
Hi, I'm Mustafa Thorman.
Hi, I'm Tanya Janka.
Hello.
And I'm excited to be the speaker at Azure Summit 2021.
It's a fantastic event that will be 11 days live streaming,
where more than 100 speakers from all over the world.
I'm excited to speak at Azure Summit about Power BI and Synapse Analytics.
And I'm going to talk about security.
And also a Microsoft MVP for Azure.
I'm speaking at Cloud Summit about automated release of .NET application.
And the best part is that this is a free event.
Come join me live at Learn TV on September 17th.
Come join me live on Learn TV on September 14th.
Come join me on Learn TV on the 14th of September this year.
A bunch of other Microsoft and community speakers.
So if you want to learn how to secure Azure, come to my talk.
Join us, it will be a lot of fun.
See you there.
See you there.
See you there.
See you there.